roll, please.
Mr. Acker, Mr. Gobb,
Present.
Mr. Lewis,
Present.
Mr. Smith,
Present.
Mayor Riggle,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman McIntyre,
Here.
Chairman Almadan.
Here. Shall we go to the approval of the,
Do you want a motion to excuse
Oh.
Mr. Acker?
yes, motion to excuse Mr. Acker.
I move we excuse Mr. Hacker.
I'll second.
He's in Florida.
Okay. Call the roll.
Well, I'll still second it.
Mr. Gobb,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Riggle,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman McIntyre,
Yes.
Chairman Almadan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now I guess we can go for the approval of the minutes, is that right?
Yep.
It's been almost a year.
Very much as I remember, I move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second. All in favor, I guess? Is that the way we do it, or?
You may call the roll?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Gobb,
Aye.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Riggle,
Abstain.
Vice Chairwoman McIntyre,
Aye.
Chairman Almadan.
Aye.
Thank you.
And then public comments?
Chairman Almadan, I just want to, for those that don't know, introduce Mayor Riggle. She's on our new city council representative on the board, so I should
Welcome.
put that on the agenda, and I didn't.
It's okay. I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank
Yes.
you.
No public comments, so introduction of Aero Precision.
Yes, I'll introduce Joe Rambrosek with Aero Precision. He's our new A&P on the field, ring the maintenance hanger, and he's, I think would like to speak on his behalf and his business behalf.
Have some handouts for you guys.
Thank you.
Not that I have enough to cover everybody, but let's share.
We'll share.
Thank you.
Well, for this. There might be two that-
You okay sharing?
One of those.
Sure.
All right. As Joe said, I'm the new co-owner of Aero Precision Unlimited at Delaware Airport, full-service maintenance facility.
Do you mind speaking into the microphone?
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. It's just,
You're
I know
okay.
it's kind
You're
of a
okay.
formal meeting.
As I said, I am the co-owner of Aero Precision Unlimited at Delaware's Airport, full maintenance service FBO. Looking to come in and kind of, so far we've revamped the hangar, as you guys see pictures. In the package you guys have, the first page obviously is the condition of the facility when we took occupancy. The preceding pages after that are pictures of the improvements, and the last page you will see the final results. We've worked really closely with the city and had what I feel to be a very good partnership and relationship with the city. Joe Bolus and Bill Frigno, Kevin, all those guys have been pretty instrumental in everything that we've accomplished, helping move the ball along, reflect the city in a positive light as far as having, an open door policy, a facility that I'm proud to present to a patron that might come in for business, and as well as future improvements. In my business plan that I've handed you guys in the last page, it has a 3-year plan, I believe, with all the improvements that we proposed to the city. With all those improvements that were proposed so far, we've far exceeded our goals at this point. Improved lighting, wall treatments. We've literally went through and gutted the whole facility. New insulation, new fire-resistant paint, metal from floor to ceiling, updated lighting. With the future holds, I'm currently working with Joe at this point to put a floor treatment in. epoxy the floors, and expand the business, grow it, sorry. Grow the business to the point, that we can afford to, look at expanding at the airport. That would be in a probably 3 to 5 year plan. With all that being said, I would encourage, anybody that's at the airport, if you guys want to stop in and see what's going on and what we're about, where we're going with this business, it's an open door policy.
When you talk about expanding, you mean a larger building or expand that building?
I can't really comment at the time, right now, because I can't guarantee anything, at this point, I don't want to tell you yes, and then 5 years down the road, it's not financially feasible for the business, But it's definitely something that myself and the other half of the business would like to do at some point. I don't know what's gonna happen. I can't.
Just two of you?
Like I said, yeah, I can't tell you yes or no. So, for now, we're just going to, work this, grow it, and see where it leads. If we outgrow where we're at, then that'll be something down the future to explore. We also, at this point, are looking at expanding services. So when I say expanding services, I mean makes and model aircraft. Typically, as most of you know that are in the aviation world, OSU right now kind of holds the monopoly on the Cirrus market. I am scheduled to go to Cirrus School April 20th, Cirrus factory maintenance training. So that'll also become an option at Delaware, as well as keeping up with recurrent trainings. I come from the fire service. I spent 15 years as a firefighter paramedic, and we know that training, keeping up with the times, training, there's always something new coming out. Part of the business plan you guys have in front of you was just our commitment to continuing with the times. You can work on airplanes that were built 70 years ago, and as a lot of you'll walk into an A&P shop and there's a mechanic that's been at A&P for 40 years, but he's maintained an IA through a recurrent training, that he goes to, but there's never been any factory trainings or going to engine schools to see what they're putting out, staying up with their current technologies. And as the business plan you have in front of you shows, that's where we're going with Aero Precision. Aero Precision will be, I don't want to say on the market leading edge, but that's what we're striving for. So that's what we're bringing to DLZ with. When I say DLZ, I mean the airport for people. With the prospect of adding avionics to
Avionics?
avionics. So
Well, you could have, 2 years ago, you'd have been rich by now.
Well, quickly finding that out, I got customers I'm trying to get avionics done for, and I'm sending them to Cincinnati because everybody is so booked out. I don't want to say it's a agreement, but the gentleman at Cincinnati Avionics down at Sporty and I have been working very close and getting my customers in a timely manner. As any of you know that fly, to get avionics done, you're usually looking at 3 to 4 months booked out before you can get any kind of aircraft in. So Scott, the gentleman down at Cincinnati Avionics, and I've been working very close to get my customers in. I don't want to say, they don't get preferential treatment, but they're not waiting 3 to 4 months to get in for their avionics work. So that's, we seem to be forging, I want to say, good, lasting relationships at this point, and I hope to keep that trend rolling. Put Delaware on the map as far as, not just a county airport, but hey, Aero Precision's at Delaware Airport. Why don't you go see them? They're good guys, and they'll get you taken care of. That's all I have for you guys, unless you guys have something for me.
Just one correction, it's a city airport.
Yes, yes.
It's a pet peeve.
I'm sorry.
No problem. And I just wondered what kind of advertising that you might have done or are thinking of doing, or how you're getting the word out.
It's funny you say that. Last week I actually submitted something to ForeFlight to get the maintenance FBO in with ForeFlight. So pilots use ForeFlight, and we'll have that come up when they're looking for a maintenance facility. Word of mouth spreads like wildfire in the aviation community. It's a common thing in the aviation community. It's a small, tight-knit community, And then we really just kinda got up and going. I got a sign on the building, we took occupancy September 1st. So, and it's been working nonstop to try and grow this business. So advertising is definitely one of those spots that could use some improvement, but.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things I've found out lately is that there's no place to get helicopters worked on. Have you looked at
I had a
that?
feeling you were gonna bring that up. I had a feeling. I just talked to Dale the other day. With the helicopter market being such a tight, like, it's a niche market, helicopters. I mean, you could have an aircraft mechanic, work on 10 different, makes and models of aircraft. A helicopter is a different beast. I mean, you're working on something that's constantly trying to tear itself apart. So there are, I do have a couple individuals in my contacts that do side work, and I told Dale that the other day. So that's a possibility, but for one Schweitzer helicopter coming in once a year maybe, and
Huh.
then,
That's every other week.
well, I mean, what are you getting, 100 hours?
The alternator goes bad, the
Yeah.
transponder's not working correctly, I know that'd be avionics.
Technique.
There's a bracket that develops a crack. There's-
Right. You get 10 of those Schweitzer helicopters, I'll get you a helicopter mechanic. Fair enough?
We can hire our own, I think, then.
Well, that's just what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
I
at this
see what you
point,
mean, but-
yeah, at this point, it's, for me, it's not financially feasible to bring a helicopter-specific mechanic in
Yeah.
and pay him to sit around for, in hopes that something breaks on your helicopter. I'm not trying to single you out, but, it's fine, for me, it's not financially feasible. But like I said, you get those 10 helicopters and we'll re-explore this. Anything else? No? Good? And again, I have an open door policy, so you guys wanna come out to the airport and see the improvements, see where the business is going and stuff like that, you're more than welcome. So, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So recap of the accident.
Kevin.
I'm sure most of you are aware, if you were watching the news, on December 20th, one of the light sport aircraft from New Flyers at OSU went off the runway, hit the ditch between the field and the runway and flipped over. Was not Spencer Aviation Flight School, and although I think they may have reported that at a couple of places, but no one was injured. It took them several hours to get it onto a rollback, bring it over to a tie-down spot, and then a few days later, the owners, they moved it into the Jetstream hangar, took the wings off of it, and then I think at this point, it's kind of what the insurance is gonna do with it, and then if the insurance owns it, then it's up to them to get rid of it, but anyway, not a whole lot of comment on that other than it did happen and no one was injured.
Glad no one was injured. You don't hear that very often in a plane accident.
Yeah, especially one that flips over.
Correct.
When was the last one? Before that one, when was the last time something like that happened?
That
out there?
twin?
It's been a while, it seems like.
Didn't a twin-
Anything serious like that, I think, was when that gyrocopter crashed at the Pancake Breakfast, and that's probably been 4 years ago. Those guys weren't hurt either. What's that?
More than 4 years ago.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe 6, 7 years.
Didn't last summer, didn't someone in a twin almost make it to Delaware Airport and hit a phone pole out there?
Yeah, but we don't even know they were
But
going.
that doesn't
to the
really
airport.
call,
They just
it's
happened.
not called Delaware, is it?
No.
Okay.
That was over.
That 421
Halfway to
that
Marysville.
crashed?
Yeah.
Off of 42.
42.
Yeah, but that was.
So that wasn't attributed to, yeah, okay.
No.
Update on the T-hanger paving process.
Oh, okay.
Start with A and B, and I'll do the resolution.
Currently on the T-hanger paving process, we are in the design portion of that right now. I think they're at 30% design has been built out on the T-hanger paving process. The surveying has been completed. That was really late last fall, early winter, wasn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, I think it was in October.
So right now, they're in between the 30 and 60% portion of the design, the consultants are. Then, of course, as everyone knows, it gets into the more, when are we going to do it phase. So we're looking at 2021 for actually presenting the asphalt and doing all the work. That will be probably late 2021 due to the way the FAA grant process works. So that's our A through F portion that we're trying to accomplish now. But, you know, we have yet to see the design portion of it yet. Like I said, it's not completed, but we're hoping here.
Is it gonna be any different than what it is now, or just an overlay of, or a grind and overlay?
It's basically a grind and overlay. It's not a total reconstruction. Of course, you know the difference in asphalt cost bills doesn't really relate to that. It's more along his lines, but it'd be very expensive to completely tear out and repave. So yeah, it'll be a mill and fill. I know there's going to be some portions that are probably going to have to be some actual sub-base repair work done, and there's some areas that the asphalt's really thin. So, you know, like I said, we haven't seen any set of plans or anything to present to you yet at this time. But I would presume they're in between the 30 and 60% design completion right now.
I should remember this, but I don't. Is there gonna be any expansion of parking while they're doing that down by the T-hangers?
No, this is complete mill and fill the T-hanger A through F process.
And it'll be taxiways only, or will the access road behind the T-hangers also be repaved?
The way we have presented it is everything that behind it, to the north side of the T-hangers.
Yes.
That is not part of this project, that's private.
Okay.
Probably not grant eligible. It could be, and if you had everything else in a perfect world, possibly be grant eligible. That's something we're looking at here in the future though, and it'll be city funded.
Okay. Thank you.
Along with that item, it's just kind of a subset of that, but we're in the early process now, getting ready to submit grants for Ramp B resurfacing, and that's the big pavement area out in front of the Jetstream hangar. That was rated in 2016 as a satisfactory, but it's going to be, by the time the grants are in place and design's done, it could be 7 years later, and it's going to drop into the preventative maintenance overlay category. So we're going to go ahead and submit grants.
So that's out along Pittsburgh Drive, kind of between
Yep.
Terminal and Jetstream?
Yep. And that pavement's original from when the Jetstream hangar went in there, and you've been on it. It's getting in pretty tough shape. So we want to go ahead and submit that, but what we'd do is I would submit a resolution before City Council, allowing the city manager to go ahead and make those grant applications. And that would happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks. And I'd like to be able to, if there's questions about what that work is about, we can talk about those tonight. I will tell you that the design is about $50,000. The city will have $2,600 into it. And then the construction is $320,000, and the city will have $16,000 into it. So again, with FAA and state money, it's very favorable towards the community. So we really try to go after these. So I'd like to be able to present this to our city council in the next meeting or two. And I'd like to be able to, if no questions, I'd like to get the support of this commission too, so we can add that to the resolution that it's supported by our airport commission. So is there any questions regarding the work?
How much did you say that would be that's to resurface that?
Yes.
The engineering alone was $50,000?
50,000, right. And that's to take it through, a pretty detailed federal process.
And then there's also some plans to expand that ramp on the other side, not out towards the taxiway, but farther east.
East, correct.
At some point, I can't remember when that is.
That ramp area is ramp A, I believe. And that out past where the helipad is would extend to the east further. That's correct. And that's I don't want to say multi-million-dollar effort, but it'd be a very large effort. That's not currently in our current CIP to move forward on that, but it is part of our, strategic business planning to look to see when that type of improvement may kick in and what it would do for us. But at this point, the project Joe's talking about is the one on the burner right now, front burners, so we can get that up and constructed, and then right behind follow through with this one too. The majority of our pavement is in very, very good shape out the airport, but these two areas right here, especially between the T hangars and this ramp, are really in need of repair now.
Are you gonna be resurfacing the taxiway or access road, and it's a taxiway actually, in front of the airspace hangars that takes you to the Compass Rose, and then you go out on Alpha, the main taxiway?
You're talking to the north
Yes.
of,
Okay,
Yes.
because,
Yeah.
when you're taxiing on
The
that,
south side.
it's kind of.
oh, yeah, yes.
The south side, right,
Yeah.
basically where the asphalt started with Airspace
Yeah.
Place.
Mhm.
From there over to the Compass Rose, out to the Compass Rose,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
So that's all part of it, including the ramps going up, we'll call them ramps or, access areas to the T hangars.
Okay,
So basically everything except for the north side where the cars are driven.
right, well.
Which is what needs it most, really.
Yeah, but
But
I'd
I
rather
don't-
replace a
I
car
don't-
tire than a prop. Car tire's a couple $100, props 12,000.
At least.
Yeah.
So what would be helpful tonight would be a motion from the commission supporting the submission of grants by the city for funding for the Ramp B design and construction.
Is that how we word it?
If you want to word it that way, you can just move on it, or you can reword it if you'd like to. Or if you want,
Sounds good to me.
You have it in writing?
I have the actual resolution, and I can read you the heading of the resolution if you'd like to hear what that is. Why don't I go ahead and read it?
Okay.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to submit grant applications to the Federal Aviation Administration and the Ohio Department of Transportation, and to enter into required agreements for the design and construction of Ramp B pavement resurfacing improvements.
And I would like to move that this commission recommend that to city council.
Okay?
I'll second.
Second? We need a second.
She did.
Oh,
Okay.
Mr. Gobb?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman McIntyre?
Aye.
Chairman Amadon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. It's very helpful.
So 2020 updates?
I can take that one also. In our budget last year, we submitted, as you guys know, well, it's to the future, but for this year, we're looking at roof replacement on Hangar C. We started the 3 oldest T hangars last year and prioritized their necessity, and last year was B, this year's C, and hopefully the following year we'll submit for T Hangar A for roof replacement. So this year, that's on the schedule. Another thing on the schedule is maintenance hangar floor treatment. As Joe talked earlier, he really sold himself short a little bit because the city's invested some money in that T hangar in the last year, but Joe and his partner have also invested quite a bit of money this year too, as far as metal, extra insulation. They're working with the design process right now and with Jerry Warner on a mezzanine. So they've spent quite a bit of money out of pocket too. One of the things that we had discussed up front was something with the maintenance floor, the 2-part epoxy treatment. So we have that in the budget for this year also. So we haven't bid that out or done anything with that yet. Of course, it's second week in January, but that's slated so we get to interrupt their operations again with updates to that maintenance hangar. And the other thing was security camera updates. We've got a little bit of money placed in our budget this year. And we've talked to, was Jeff Koloski last year about doing this. So we've touched base with Miss Daly this year. And she's got some ideas and some changes for some security camera updates. I spoke to her probably late last fall. We were looking at placing a couple different cameras. So kind of waiting on her to get back. They're gonna we have one that's kind of on the frizzle right now that we need to update, and then replacement of a new one. So
So are these just a replacement of the cameras, or are they additional cameras?
One's definitely that we're looking at is an additional camera, and one's looking at replacement of one of our first initial cameras that we put up that it comes and goes.
There are none on the runway right now, are there?
No, but the additional camera that we had discussed before, we were looking at trying to put something out around the AWOS, pan, tilt, zoom. Susan and I, it actually wasn't the first conversation, but after we had a discussion, I told her that's where I'd kind of like to place one. So at any time, we could zoom east to west and see the runway. And of course, you know, you have to place it somewhere it's not obstructive. So that's actually where we're looking at placing one right now.
I was just thinking something on the runway, so that if something did happen out there, there'd be some sort of a record of it for insurance purposes or.
Well, you probably have to have multiple cameras just because the angles for something to happen.
And
But
the
of course,
length of it.
being a pilot, you understand the further to the east, further to the west, or your chances are larger. Right now, what we're looking at is one, you can kind of pan, tilt, zoom, and go each direction. As far as putting two up, it's probably going to be, depending on the expense. Some of the cameras we had initially purchased were, I'm not going to say cheap, because nothing's really cheap, but you know, they're pretty much outdated. The video quality's bad. And like I said, we have one right now. It's just seems to work when it wants to. So we're working with her on that, and she's exceptional to work with. She's very enthusiastic, so, and she knows her job. So I'm really looking forward to her assistance on this project.
I was gonna bring this up later, but this seems like a good time. Have you had any more conversations with her since the last time we brought it up, about better internet access around there and perhaps to the T hangars and,
We've had some limited internet access, but she has a different vision than I guess what our past IT director had. As you know, we were looking at, I want to say close to $90,000 for internet access to the T hangars. She's definitely the person I think to get on board, and she's looking at different avenues as far as even fiber right now. So there's some discussion. Do I have a total answer for you right now? No, I don't, but she's been very instrumental in talking about that. Kevin may even know a little bit more than I do about it. That's kind of been his whole cup of tea.
Well, the initial plan, that was Consolidated Electric. They were the ones who come out and they gave us an estimate, and where that kind of fell through was they wanted to know how much interest we thought that we would have for each tenant in hangars A through F. The other question was the billing, and the city wanted them to take care of the billing. And I think the $90,000 figure was correct, and I don't think after they were out there we had really any more conversation with them, because I think they realized that probably the interest was not going to support their cost to bring it there.
That was probably double fold, as Kevin said. It was the amount initially right off the gate for $90,000, and then they had no interest in individual billing. They wanted, you know, in order to do that, they wanted to bring actually another person in between the city and themselves, and the price just kept going up and up and up. But yeah, like I said, she is definitely, we've had this discussion, so she's definitely, I mean, wide open when it comes to figuring things out. She's been
She's
great.
trying to look at different avenues that we may be able to accomplish it, and maybe even something we could do in-house versus using an outside source like WOW or Consolidated.
well, that's what I thought, because you've already got fiber there, I think, to the terminal.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
I couldn't, I'm no IT expert, but I couldn't figure out where the $90,000 number came from when we talked about it before.
By the time that they hang,
It was not off of city fiber though.
Correct.
That was Consolidated bringing cable through there, and then they were talking about putting repeaters and each down through the hangars.
That was Consolidated that gave that? quote?
Yeah.
that was a separate service of its own, instead of piggybacking something off the city service. And that was getting it to basically finish running down Pittsburgh Drive up to the T hangars in the center, and spreading each direction.
So that's one of the issues that we know has been interest in, that if the committee decides to make that a priority, we can involve the IT director at a higher level, maybe even invite her into a meeting, talk about some of the concepts, as well as some of the risk management folks to talk about, anytime you open up the fiber, especially city fiber, to use, then you have security issues and concerns like that. Then it's just the access costs. So there's a lot to consider, but if it is truly a real priority for the airport, we can really advance the project. And I want to say, we've got the right person on board now to really help out and provide some really good options for us to contemplate as a
Well,
group.
I think if you were to ask our customers, our tenants, they would tell you it's a priority to have internet access.
When they were asked before, there was certain individuals not going back to the past because, like Bill said, moving to the future with Ms. Daly is definitely the way to go. Because we kind of, as employees, were told it was not gonna piggyback off the city's internet at that time, so we had to look at a different avenue, John. Like I said, she's very adamant and very good at what she does, so I don't wanna look at the past, but when there was any kind of fee assessed with it, a couple individuals that had approached us had lost interest completely. You know, even for a minimal fee of a monthly fee just for service, like, oh, no, you know, and we've had this discussion before, it's, you know, you have to have revenue to get things, so, but that I know for a fact, cause I spoke to one individually, actually two, one was out there the day we were looking at it, and I'm like, well, we weren't looking for a monthly fee, and I can get most things off my phone nowadays, so, it's a double-edged sword.
I was just gonna ask that. Have we taken a unofficial poll of the tenants if they really want the internet and what they would do with it?
I don't have any way to do that other than walking around there on a
Right.
couple of nice summer. I mean, that, you know, the Survey Monkey.
We could do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's
just
easy.
We could do
Well-
that and ask the simple question, would you want internet service and how much would you pay for internet service?
That was
Oh.
one thing, a little bit off base, but on the survey, I thought this was great, but nobody elaborated on anything. It was just, they said yes or no, and they didn't say why or how, or, I was disappointed in that aspect of the survey. I wish people would have spent some more time and expounded on a few of their thoughts.
They were quick to complain, but
Yeah.
then didn't really explain the background of why they were complaining, maybe.
Well, I'm questioning how much they would really utilize it. The trend in the last so many years in avionics is, you know, you're using ForeFlight or Garmin Flight. You do all your flight planning, hopefully not while you're driving the car, but at home, or with the internet connection that you have in your tablet. And when you get to the aircraft, it automatically uploads and goes. So our aircraft and our partnership, we don't use the internet at the hangar, even though we have it through Airspace Place. Now, if you're running a business out of the hangar, which I'm not sure is condoned, I could see where the internet would be very valuable.
But I think what they were using it for were the builders. And if they had a question about
Yes.
something that they were
That's a part of it I
working on.
hadn't even thought about, but, you know, I do flight planning in my hangar, and my phone doesn't get any service to speak of in there. I have to go outside. The metal walls block it, apparently. You know,
Okay. I understand.
some of the the Airspace Place hangars have internet, but it's not very good.
Well, I would agree with that, yes. It's there, it's not fast,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
And half of the time, I can't download anything on it.
Okay.
Move on to 2019 updates completed.
Kevin, you wanna take the fuel terminal?
As I think I told you, the commission last time, that we did install in April the new fuel terminal. I'm sure some of you have used it. It's a marked improvement over the old one.
It's great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it closes the sail with just in a few minutes after you turn it off. It powers up, energizes, and we don't seem to have that problem with the pressure not building up like we did. You will still see that, like, slow periods of time if you're like the first fuel of the day, bad weather, whatever. But in the summer, when several aircraft are fueling, it goes much quicker. We had a little bit of a bump in the road after it was up for a couple months, but their IT department, our IT department got that straightened out. And I think you'll notice it remembers your tail number. If you program it in, next time you come up like that, it's even quicker than the first time setting it up.
That's a wonderful feature.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, when you don't bring a good enough coat and you're cold out there, that's a great feature.
Yeah, yeah, so, am I doing the others?
Well, that's just to, we were talking about the IT capacity director earlier. We spent many hours in conversations because we were targeted that the error was on our behalf on the new fuel terminal. I'm not sure who was there when we had issues with it coming offline, online, offline, online. Well, it ended up, it was not the city's issue, and Susan Daly was instrumental, and she stayed on top of it. We had probably an hour and a half long conference call, and she basically told him she wanted this, and this, free service. I mean, stood behind everything Kevin and I said, and she was on top of it. So just going back to the IT portion of it, I think we've got the right person in mind to see what we can do for you. But I was really impressed, and that was probably one of my first huge dealings with her was that whole process. So, but seems to be up and working, and everybody likes it. Months.
Hangar B roof replacement, we did do that, last summer, and that, I don't know any of you that have hangared in the old ones, we have that old insulation that falls down, the birds peck at. This has felt on the back side of it, so all of that insulation is gone. It's a much better product, and from what we had one hangar that was getting some drips in it. The contractor came out and took care of that. As far as I know, there's been no other problems with it. Snow blower front mount.
That's we've had a blower to utilize at the airport. We tried utilizing it, mounting it on one of Parks' old Kubota tractors. The problem with that being is the snow blower was 100% behind you. The only way to operate it, and Kevin can explain that even better than I can, is to completely turn around. Even though your steering wheel, throttle, clutch, everything's in front of you, you had to operate it turning behind you. So we, in our CIP process last year, we purchased it's like a long PTO shaft with a frame with a gearbox. So now the snowblower can hang out in front of you, and we try to utilize it again. What we're kind of hoping to do is, if we ever get to use it this year, which we hope we don't, is the last 4, 5, 6 feet on the runway, we're hoping that this blower will actually blow the snow clear up past the runway lights, so that we're not out there for days after a storm trying to physically push it back with loaders, backhoes, everything of that nature. So we haven't got to try it out yet. Hope we don't. But for a minimal cost, Bill was very supportive, and we've got a piece of equipment that you really can't use, hard to use, and so he was instrumental in helping us get that last year. And it's actually attached to the tractor, ready to go. Has been for probably about 45 days now. And if we don't get to use it this year, we'll try it next year.
So this is in addition to the brush, the big brush that came from
Correct.
Ashtabula or whatever?
Yes. This
Yes.
just mounts onto the tractor, and we had used it, we've had it probably 6, 7 years. It moves slow, but one problem we have, even on the ramps, we push it as far as we can, and then if you have another snow coming, or just the fact that it is close to wingtips, we're pushing it, well, the ground, we rut it up, and then we're fixing that in the spring. It's 8 foot wide, we ought to be able to leave 6, 7 foot on the pavement, and then just bring that through. It'll shoot it as far as 25 feet. We just put it in the ditch, let it melt, and then we're ready for the next snow. Maybe even be able to use it in hangars so we can reduce the piles at the north end of the hangars.
The broom and the blower does a good job, but the problem with that is you still get a windrow towards the edge of the runway. The broom, where it really does a good job, is actually on the asphalt of cleaning right down to pavement without destruction. But I was kind of hoping the blower and a light, cold snow, non-sticky snow would do. It does a good job of cleaning anything left from the broom, but it actually doesn't blow it clear off the runway. So just another inexpensive way to try to make it easier that we're not there for days after the fact. So like I said, if we don't get to use it, it would not disappoint us a bit. Restroom facility, if you wanna move on to that, we kinda touched base with a little bit earlier. We had that done late last year. So the maintenance hangar has its own facility now. So they probably can't tell you if it's good, bad, or indifferent, cause they weren't there before, but during the process before they moved in, we were in a actually waiting hold pattern, and in between, changing maintenance individuals, we are able to get that installed. So that's done, completed, signed off on, and usable, and as far as I know, it works good. Maintenance exterior painting, Kevin, you can take that up.
Yeah, that was another thing that, during the interim of, the maintenance FBOs changing, we had, the outside of that aircraft maintenance hangar painted. The roof was painted the year before, coated, painted, the outside was painted, and, it should be good for 15 years, if not a little longer. Yeah, it's a better product. We paid a little bit more, but this is a better product.
Overview of policies and procedures.
Okay, I'll start off with that. And that's really a subset of a larger topic, which is the strategic business plan. We're gonna look at those, and city manager invited Greg Heaton, our consultant with CMT, to the meeting tonight. I'll say we're absolutely behind on delivering a product on the strategic business plan. We're aware of that. And we did ask Mr. Heaton to come tonight to speak in that regard as to where we are, why we're late, and what we can expect here shortly, because so much from regarding policies and procedures and future topics, and a lot of the things we talked about that John shared in his email with the committee really revolve around coming up with some strategies, or the strategy can be we're just accepting the way we are. It's a great airport. We don't need to change anything, or we want to make some improvements. But this document is really important to us in order to maybe uncover some things, to give us some things to think about as we move forward and make decisions. So really at this point, I want to invite Greg up here and talk a bit about the process, where we've been, and what we can expect in terms of a delivery, and bring some to conclusion, a document that we can start to work off of. So Greg, thank you for being here.
No, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mayor, Chairman. I appreciate it. Thanks. It's great to see you all again. I will start by in the work that we've done. You really do have a tremendous facility, and as you all recall, I mean, gosh, it was just a smidge over a year ago that I sat here and first met many of you, and we dove in, and part of the transition for the maintenance providers, some of those hangars took attentions in those early days. We did some review of some leases. And then dove into the report. But I would sit here and tell you all tonight, and I'm prepared to help answer any questions. I mean, the responsibility for the tardiness is entirely ours, sort of not Bill. And Bill's been more than gracious and helpful, as have Joe and Kevin and so many others. In those early days, completing a survey, completing interviews of key folks. We generated a report probably mid to early fall, I think, last year. And I sat with Bill just prior to the holidays. Obviously, some good comments for us to dive into some areas deeper to provide better background. So happy to share sort of thoughts on where we're headed. We're at that now very diligently. Obviously, in order to get that completed, we would hope to have a revised document back to Bill before the end of the month in January, so we can move forward. Happy to sort of summarize some of what we've seen and heard for you all. I can give you what I think are some of the leading areas that will come out of those recommendations of things. Again, you have a wonderful facility. I mean, it's amongst a distinct handful in the state in terms of the runway length and capability there. Obviously, you have a supportive owner in you all in the city, and that is not true in every general aviation airport. There are some pieces that hold it back from, I guess, being better realized or maximized in its performance. And those are things that have been identified through those various processes, and we're trying to get that written up and then provide. One of the things that when I last sat with Bill was, in looking at other comparables both in the state of Ohio, and then if you look out at others that fit in a similar, so Bill said, bring us those and identify clearly things that might set those apart. Why are those airports in similar circumstances? And by that I mean sitting in metropolitan statistical areas that are similar to, say, the Columbus region, have a single runway system, perhaps have a supportive sponsor or, city run. Why are they doing so well? And perhaps areas where we could do better with some of that. Clearly one of those items was the leases that exist today, and some of the rules and regs and policies. I would tell you, if those aren't clear and those aren't set and those feel variable, most businesses shy away. Most think, I don't have time, I don't want to mess with it, and that applies whether you're coming in. Doesn't really impact a GA pilot like myself who wants to rent a hangar, particularly if I'm not having to sign a long-term agreement, but effectively could operate quasi month to month. But it certainly impacts anybody who's going to put an investment in terms of a hangar or development, or relocate facilities. At the end of the day, while they are mobile assets, it still is a big commitment for somebody to decide that's where we will base our corporate jet. And obviously some of the focus, it would sound like in my comments, much of that is why is the corporate community not here in Delaware? And that's not to exclude the business plan looks at the GA and that potential as well, but and it's always difficult to not make the GA community feel like, hey, you don't want us and you're leaving us behind. But obviously, you just look at the national trends and GA traffic projected to grow at maybe 0.5% a year, and some days I think that's just the FA's economists trying to be kind and not say, hey, we're not sure it'll grow at all. It may continue to drop. Every time I see a plane drop out of the sky, I think, ah, shoot, because it's one less plane because they're not building them very quickly. But the corporate traffic has, for the last number of years, grown at a 6 to 8% clip. Last year, I think it was closer to 15. And by all indicators, it seems as if those pressures or opportunities still reside there. So the leases and the policies and the operating guidelines are a piece, and we've spent a fair amount of time with those. We've provided some of that in the last, and again, to the form or the approach we had. Bill goes, it'd really be great if you just gave me a red line copy. Give us ours and show us areas that we change rather than an awful lot of, here's all the entire best industry practices, and that's fine because you have, for example, in Jetstream or Airspace Place, you have leases. So there's some element of, well, we're not going to change them. But we certainly want to know things that we don't want to do again. There'll be a component in one of those recommendations. I think while your staff, the airport does an unbelievably great job, there's probably need for some more resources. With that will be the balancing, how do we accomplish that? Where would dollars come from to do that? But when you talk about people who want to be there, they certainly want to know the reliability to not make it too close to home or personal, but corporate operator MPW left Newark Heath over in Licking County not long ago, had resided over in Newark for many, many years, and opted to move over to John Glenn in Columbus. And you ask why. Clearly they had been there, so the runway length and facilities are all there. It really boils down to a service capability, a reliability with snow removal. So it was great to hear the improvements they've made the equipment to be able to do that. Operators want to know that it'll be there every time. And we know, I can tell you, last winter, Ohio, even OSU Airport had a couple instances where all their equipment was broke, and they had 2 snow events where corporate operators couldn't leave, and they were most unhappy. And I'm sure they feel like they pay a fair amount to be there. And so when it comes time or an opportunity for them to decide further investments and such, it is difficult then to compete with a John Glenn or a Rickenbacker in our community that gives them that assurance, because they are seeing Part 139 certified operation with the commitment to have the equipment in place and the staff to do that regardless of day or time. So those are a couple big pieces. The third one relates to advertising, marketing of the entire facility and creating a brand name. We identified today at the start, and based on some of the surveys and some of the interviews, I would tell you that some of what the reputation and some aspects of our name and reputation are not the things that we would desire. Many are. Certainly the staff, Kevin and his staff do a great professional job, but there were some aspects that got shared related again back to policy and rates and charges or leases. That's not encouraging. And if I were coming to the airport and I'm trying to decide who I would base there or I would make an investment, I might come chat with you all, but the truth is I'm gonna go chat with the people who are already there. And if that story is not a raving success, they have opportunities elsewhere. And so that was a piece that again builds upon those leases, minimum standards, rules and regulations, carries over then to once we have those in place and we have the staffing and the equipment and the desired service level, you know, anywhere from, again, plowing the runways to providing de-icing, catering, fueling, and those sort of things. Great. We got to get word out and tell people. And some of that will be a staffing thing because well, the staff does a great job. I was sort of amazed. The list kept going on and stuff they were getting done. I was thinking, wow, there's more and more. So it's very difficult to have that free time to market. And the notable example would be everybody who flies into Columbus for the golf outing. Why are they not flying here? We're as close, if not perhaps closer for many. Why does that not show up? Maybe you've all done it, even on a poor internet or a Wi-Fi connection. Google that, Columbus area airports. I realize search engines run different each time, but the last time I did it, it didn't come up at all. It covered a lot of, you know, you were down 10 deep and it still wasn't on the list. So there needs to be some work and perhaps some coordination with the IT folks to go, let's make sure. So some of our recommendations are probably going to go to, I hate to get in front of it, and I do not have that revised and final report over to Bill to do that, so I don't want to get too far in front of, over my skis for him. But part of that recommendation would be many of those folks who are out there and go, these folks are really doing it well. That site is independent of a city. It is not buried on some city page where, oops, wrong click, now I'm into how do I pay my utility bill. It is focused to the airport. It has been tailored and tagged such that when you do a search, it comes up. And somebody has spent some time thinking of the 100 different ways somebody might search. I really am trying to come to Columbus, Ohio. We went Delaware to land on top. I mean, we would have accomplished something if we could get where it pops up first, maybe before John Glenn. They got a whole fleet of people sitting over there thinking how to do the exact same thing. But that's what we want. And then beyond that, farming those connections. And to some degree, it's a little bit of in Joe's case, there certainly is a word of mouth amongst that corporate. And again, most of this will focus to how do we get those corporate operators to want to come here. But some of that will have to be specific, and that's where sort of some resources come in. Somebody will have to be tasked to, so it's a staffing, it's a manpower capability to target those folks who come in and out and track them. A lot of that gets done today, but, and again, I don't want to say it, but I imagine Kevin doesn't get a lot of free time at the end of his day to be thinking, hey, how do I connect with that corporate operator that I know flies into Columbus occasionally and is choosing a different facility.
We're never gonna be a Columbus. We're never gonna have a lane aviation. And, you know, I think we probably recognize that, everyone does. But it would be nice to have some of the services that they do.
Absolutely.
But I agree with you 100%. We need to do some advertising. We need to get the word out there to do that. I think the grounds and the airport and stuff, I think it's taken great care of. I've
Very much so. Yes.
rarely seen it when it wasn't nearly perfect. But we do have to let some people know that we're there and available. I don't think we've done that ever, maybe.
We have a new CVB board, which is our Conventional Visitor Bureau, a new director there. And that'd be a good person to contact. Make sure that they know about it and what we offer here and how close we are to the golf courses when they want to come here to see the tournaments. So there's some things we can do here within the city with other resources.
But we also have a limiting factor is if we get 6 or 8 citations or a Gulfstream or 2 or a Falcon, we don't have any place to put them either.
Right. Correct. Well, and that's the part that we're trying to dial in is a little bit of the the step-by-step, what are those thresholds? We certainly, the city's in an environment where it's difficult, the FAA environment, let me say this, where
Yes.
there were years ago when a reliever airport, those like Delaware, which are in these, municipal, large urban areas, got additional funding, and that went away. So you get the same amount of, so to speak, entitlement as Pequot. Well, it's really unfortunate, because the truth is, not only do you have greater facility needs because of your traffic, oftentimes the cost can even be higher in getting those in place, and that is a topic, but.
Well, something else that we haven't ever really talked about is whether we want all that traffic.
Have you flown in and out of OSU during the Memorial Tournament?
Not during the Memorial Tour, I
It's
know
not a-
better.
It's doable, but it's not a good time.
Yeah.
And there is a dozen citations parked there, but a lot of the golfers fly in and the plane flies back out and they come back in 4 days. But still, you're right, there's no place for 10 citations out here.
Well, I'd be happy to enter, and again, I appreciate you letting me be here. I apologize profusely. It has been our responsibility that we've been tarried in getting the report to the city staff. They've always been very prompt in whatever we've asked and back, and so.
So what are your thoughts before you get away? What could, I mean, before we can do anything else, we've got to have some revenue. It all starts with that. What could we do first?
To create revenue?
What would,
that's
yeah,
you
what are
wanna
your
know?
thoughts? I mean, what jumps out at you?
I think there's either, I probably would tell you, I think there's either just an investment in putting some, to make sure that you have enough of the services there.
Enough what?
Services.
Okay.
So that and again, and I'm gonna focus largely to a corporate operator.
Because you think that's where the money is, not in the smaller GA stuff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is, fuel sales alone, or land leases. But both could operate on spec. So one of the things that we've discussed with the city is, the city said, hey, I've got $2 million, do we go build a hangar for someone? Or do we just create ground lease areas? And so an airspace place, or somebody else can come build the next group, there's lots. Now, if I asked you, what prevents that from happening today? Not a great deal, meaning the city has always been receptive, you all are receptive, right? What keeps somebody from doing it? Today there is some limitation in the GA side, or the small GA side, T hangars. Will they get filled? It's not awful, we live in a growing area, but that's their concern. The net revenue to you all, to ground leases, for you all meaning the airport, is pretty small. You're charging a quarter, 25 cents per square foot per year. It might change the net revenue stream $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $6,000. That's not gonna pay for an awful lot of additional staff or anybody else to do anything. And it might not even cover, certainly not gonna cover the long-term capital requirements of repairing the taxi lanes every now and then. We'd be lucky if it covers the extra snow plowing, grass cutting, and changing, just tending to facilities. That's every airport experiences that with GA. And at some point, if you go look around at airports, they'd migrate from, they really should own the hangar, because there's slightly more revenue back to the city versus somebody built it themselves. Because you're a developer.
The
you have a-
city should build a
Correct.
hangar. You mean,
Because if a private guy's willing to build it, he's gonna make a profit. Nobody's doing that to lose money, right? So there's in effect money leaving the field. We can talk in detail about how much that is, but the truth is, keep it on. But at some point, the airport gets busy enough that burden of taking care of those facilities, they decide, I don't wanna do that anymore, we're just gonna be the ground landlord, I'm just gonna lease your property. So the balance of meeting the airport's financial needs is difficult in that, which is why most smaller GA airports aren't self-supported, can't pay their own bills, and they require their city, county, or somebody to sort of speak subsidize it. Corporate is clearly willing to pay the money, and you have sort of the same. I would tell you at the start of this, part of our problem, I shouldn't phrase it that way. I'll put it this way, and I spoke to Bill one time. We live in the Midwest, so we shouldn't have 99-year leases. The FAA says that we're not gonna have those anymore, and I'm not sure, I don't agree with them from just a professional side of the house, as long as I have a provision to have fair market value rates, I don't care if you lease it for 1,000 years, right? In fact, that might be good for me if I'm always got the privilege. What if the reason they have a policy that says we're not gonna allow you to have leases more than 50 years is they really treat it as if that's sort of it's a whole taking. Again, for any of you here, you can see where, well, why? As long as I'm getting fair market value for that lease, why is that a problem? But nonetheless, it exists for us there.
Well, that's why we don't have another corporate hangar, is because of the lease. I'm
Correct.
sure you're aware of that.
That's correct. And so when you try to go put in the policy in place, it is surmountable, which is the part of the have the rules and regs in a policy, in a lease document, and it's set, and you're good. That's what it is, and that's what it'll be, and it doesn't seem in play, and people will make their peace with it. Otherwise, if there's any, I believe, in the Midwest compared to some other parts of the country, if I lease ground from you and I go build a hangar, it's sort of like it's a Midwest farmer thing. Well, that's my building. I built that building. I'm not giving it back to you in 25 years or 45 years. That's my building. Well, that's not really true. The ground lease just offered you an opportunity to make an investment. You use your investment however you want. Presumably you're doing that to make a return in whatever capacity. And at the end of that time, it's done. But it's a Midwestern mindset. You don't run into that near as much in the east or the south. And so I've had discussions, Bill and others going, because I'm pretty convinced if we decided to go out and build a hangar right now, you'd have somebody show up going, yeah, I'll lease that hangar from you. And then they don't have quite the mental block, if you will. But having documents that are set, even regardless of what we've done in the past, would help that play. And again, to your point, that's what some people hear. So that needs to change, where that's our stuff, it's well thought out, and I think that's Bill and Tom's hope is that the business plan will give them a basis to say, we've done it, we've done this. And so again, I've tarried, and that's my bad, and they've been gracious, but I've committed to, let's get that done back to them so they could move forward on that front. But I believe people would come. To your earlier question, I'd be very interested. I don't mean to drag this. I will be here as long as you wish, but I don't want to take the time. But do we want that? I believe you have some need for that. It would, I'm going to liken it to one of the comparable airports, for those of you who fly might know, DuPage Airport in West Chicago. They had a mindset a long time ago that says, you're in the path of growth. You can either plan for it and capitalize, or you can just let it run over you. But you are in the path of growth. And I guess I will look and see if anybody would disagree and tell me I'm wrong, but it sure seems as if you're in the path. There will be a certain amount that will always go to Ohio State, but to the point where even they failed twice last year. They had equipment that would open runways. I mean, it blew my mind, and I knew about it the first morning because one of my former employees left and went over there and was the business manager. He has recently left. I really digress here and went to Greensville, Spartansburg Airport. I will tell you that he did his very best to wave the flag for the Buckeyes while Clemson went off to the game. He was forced as an airport employee to throw a tailgate party at the thing. He says, I made Buckeyes though. I figured I'm not going down easy. So he made them Buckeyes to serve at their tailgate party. But he'd actually called me that morning to go, holy cow, our equipment's broke. We can't open the thing, you know, and it was a little bit, what do I do? To which time ago, call Columbus, call John Glenn and see, and they sent over some equipment to help them address their thing that night. They don't have, again, remember, we have a longer runway. And somebody goes, they got parallels. They don't really need parallels. In fact, they're taking a little flack from FAA right now, trying to justify, well, do you really need a parallel or do you not? And obviously, they have plans to do that, but I think we do. I think you want to be, it is not the only, this is just me and my advice. Ultimately, you all will decide what you want. I would tell you, the airport is just one tool in the toolbox of the city and the county or the region. It's only one of a dozen important factors for someone to decide where they locate a business or how much they use in a particular thing. But I would sure want your airport to be ready and capable if somebody said, well, we use our aircraft, or we use it in the course of business, and we're trying to decide whether we're here, and they would choose Delaware City or Delaware County at least, rather than Dublin, you know, or beyond, because they can operate their folks in and out, and that's the goal. So not to have growth just for growth's sakes, but certainly to have, and then policies and procedures and rates and charges set that fairly, and so what we're trying to provide is, as well, what does it cost? If we need additional staff to support a more robust, because you have it today. I was here to tell you today, 24/7 if I wanted to fly, and you make a phone call, and your good folks are willing to get up in the middle of the night or do whatever they gotta do. But if we had that, what does that cost? And we need to make sure our rates and charges reflect, so we're not subsidizing that corporate operator. Despite the fact they always go, well, I'm buying lots of fuel, you should nearly let me come for free. I always go, sure, you can land on the highway too, I guess, but we have an airport, so unless you wanna land on the highway, we're gonna charge what, we're not trying to make a ton of money, but we are gonna pay our expenses, and those services come at a cost, so. But I would be interested if you all felt differently, but, and I think most of the folks out there, how do we get the money? Little chicken egg, but I feel like as if, it's within reach. There would be a nominal investment to get folks to be attracted to be there. And again, we could choose to let them make their own investment on a ground lease if you wished, but.
Investments in hangars, you mean, being the first step, probably.
In hangars, yeah. With that traffic, I don't think you'll have too much trouble getting appropriate grants, again, to the 95.5 deal, if the traffic is there, for aprons and such.
But not for buildings.
Not for buildings. FA, at the end of the day, buildings and fuel are revenue producing facilities. The FA really has a hard time. So the smallest, you would qualify. I'd still count on one hand people who really have been able to build hangars or buildings with their federal money. The FA says, well, if you got everything else taken care of perfectly, that's hard to do, frankly. But they still sort of balk and delay and drag on long enough. I've seen them delay people long enough, well, then their payment wasn't great, and they were back to. And in some ways, I get it. It's a revenue-producing facility. FA says, why would we want to give you money, build a hangar so you can charge sub-market rate to pay for it? I mean, that's their premise, and it's hard to argue with, frankly. And as a GA pilot, I get it. I want everything for free too sometimes, but it doesn't work. So, but again, I apologize on our behalf for our tardiness. We were working hard to get that back to Bill, but I will answer any other questions you have or share any other thoughts about what we've seen or heard and found out.
In the surveys that I was reading through, there seems to be kind of a sense of pushing towards the corporate at the expense of the general aviation. How would you think about taking care of that, or addressing that with the push to possibly get more corporate?
Two things have been on the plate for us. I think some of it is simply, first and foremost, I think it's a communication issue, personally. There's no need for folks to, I'm going to say it carefully, my wife says, you can't tell me how to feel. There'd be no need for them to feel like that. I think some of that grows from people like the old days, kind of come and go. The Schmeier Airport weren't fenced. I wish I could sort of drive out where I want to go and pull up to the hangar. They also want to be sure that their plane doesn't have problems. And so whether we have no corporate planes but 200 GA aircraft, we still have the problem. And when it happens to them, they'll be most unhappy. I think there's a communication part that where the focus is not on corporate and not GA. In fact, the plan talks and lays out sort of growth potential for both and what it takes for that to occur. So we hope that the plan is something that can be part of that communication out to them, going, we're making provision for growth in GA, in the services you want, the facilities you want, the needs that you have, not at the expense. It's a little like, and then I liken it to having a city that is a bedroom community. If you don't have any business but all residents, the tax crunch seems pretty high. It takes a good mix of industry, business, and residences to bring that financial package together. And I believe the same is true on an airport. An airport with strictly certain number of GA planes, again, is very difficult to make it self-supporting. And while it may seem fine, and where most communities might even be supportive and say, well, we're willing to do that, not any different than having a public pool or something. When budgets get tight, it is very hard for a council or a county commission to defend, why are we subsidizing for those people who can own an aircraft? As I might have shared when I first sat here, it has always got to remain about jobs and economy, if it's ever proceed. So, big part is communication. The latter part is, at one point, perhaps, of course, now you have a new A&P operator, which is wonderful, and they're making a large investment in that hangar. But there be some consideration, if that facility ever weren't to meet their need, or they expanded, or however it happened, might be that moving it in proximity to some of those folks, there could be some separation. That certainly is a part. What you'll see at some of the airports that really have it going on is, ultimately there is a little separation when they can accomplish that physically. Have this corporate iron sitting over here and have GA over here. Not so they don't feel welcome in one another, it just helps them feel like they can have a little bit more freedom to move about. But this aircraft over here worth $5–10 million does not want everybody running around or appearing sort of loosey-goosey. And so we sort of laid out how might that happen here at Delaware for us to do that if that growth ensued. So we'll have a plan for them both to be provided for. Both are very important.
Was there any, I don't know, investigation, so to speak, in terms of a county and the city working together to help fund the airport? Was that considered in the plan at all?
Sure. And in my first round, in fairness, Bill, I was quiet about it. Didn't say a whole lot, mostly because I didn't want to step on toes and get myself in trouble. But sure, I have an opinion about the matter, and we will write that up. And again, certainly provide comparables that say, here's how these do it. There are some real advantages. I'm just going to pick on different parts. But we will touch on that, and I think one of the recommendations likely will be to tell you, would encourage you to say, I might encourage you, I'm not saying you would have to or that's necessary for success, but I encourage you to explore, could an authority be effective? And the benefit is, obviously your airport's serving beyond the city of Delaware. You are in fact providing a service to the region and the county, and yet you're doing it all on your own back, so to speak. And so there could be some merit in having additional partners, and I don't need to tell you all of the complexities and some of those things, but it has happened. It doesn't happen a lot. I think the last one's probably in the state of Ohio, go back probably close to 2000-ish. I think Huron County created an airport authority, and there was a transition. I worked to try to get one down in the Cincinnati area not out of the hands, but it's owned by a state college, which makes its bureaucracy, it makes Ohio State look uber efficient. And so they just simply can't respond. And the example would be for those of you who are in the, who know, years ago when Blue Ash in Cincinnati was closing, it was no mystery, it's gonna close. 30, 40 planes were gonna go find a new home. This airport was one of those that was nearby and could have easily been the recipient of that. Went, told them, no, College Board. No, we'll think about it a while. No, we don't have time to talk about that. I mean, went on. 3.5 years later, they decided, yep, let's build those hangars. Great, but by then those planes had already all found a home. And we built them, and they are now full today, but instead of being full the day they opened, it took us probably 2.5 years of fairly aggressive marketing to let folks know they were there and all that.
How are those Port Authority doing? You said none had started since 2000 or something. How are they doing today?
How are they doing today?
Yeah.
They're doing great. Many of the examples of airports of your caliber, your national position, I would tell you, are have an authority and have a strong city or county behind them. Those authorities, when they represent more than one, have worked out who's going to appoint. I mean, that's where that lies. To truly create and stand separate is a little tough, because your first question to me is, well, where's the money come from? So unless the airport, is already in a self-supporting standpoint, and then you go, well, and then where would it come for any investment? Many times they, because very few get created, even Columbus Regional Airport Authority does not collect a tax. And so even if you were granted that tax, we all know how difficult it would be to go out and create an authority and get,
Tax, you say?
and get
Well,
it.
they do get, like I'm not sure what it's called, but a percentage of the revenue from all the businesses on it, on the.
Correct, but I mean, as a resident in the, you know, in the area, I don't, like my library, I don't have an extra point, you know, 0.5% cent or something on my property tax, none of that. And they have the legal authority to implement, and they just have to go out and convince the world that that's okay and survive whatever backlash they got. But yes, their tenants on the field pay a percent, that's part of their lease agreement. Frankly, pretty high, but they can because that's what they are.
Something like that, I think.
So, but I think an authority, because you could bring in an additional partner, potentially the county or maybe others, and oftentimes they have, their advantage is they move faster. It'd be like this commission that's entirely focused on its growth and development and making its decision, its interest, and it never gets sidelined, and it's entirely focused on that. So many of them do that. It is not to say that there aren't facilities out there that are run by a city or a county that are, you know, in full stride. But I'm just trying to say, it is tougher because the city has a whole city to run, or a county has a whole county to run, and it can often be, we'll get to it, and it's not. So, but we will speak to that issue and encourage it at least to be explored a little bit, and then share examples of these airports that are similar characteristics, why they're doing well, and some of them that will be its answer is they have those tools in place to make it happen.
Okay, thank you.
I think that has been talked about for years, that the county wanted to take us over, be a big partner with us. The trouble is, you've got 3 commissioners and 7 council members. And then the not too that past, we did not get along. I mean, we couldn't have a meeting together between the commissioners and council. And I don't know whether it'll ever go back to that way. It may. Who knows who will get elected.
Between the county commissioners and the city
And
council?
the city council, yeah.
And I know that
Yeah.
as long as I worked at the Office of Aviation, that was always an issue.
Yes.
So whenever it was brought up as a possibility, it was always like, oh, no.
Why
Now,
don't-
today we do meet, once a year we get together, we do share things, but that's not to say the next group of people will feel the same. So I'd just be very cautious about.
It is, I don't mean to imply it's not
I know.
difficult, and to get created and set aside and have both parties leave it be, in other words, created, and many in the state got created, as you know, and they can't be abolished. So that, you know, if they were created by a county commissioner, but they have a legal standing where they can't, they at least have to be a legal action, not just somebody's in a bad mood one month, and that's it, we're abolishing the authority, and they're gone.
Right.
We've worked, I was just up the other day, Wood County Airport, Bowling Green, Ohio, is an airport authority, created by the county, but they have a partner sort of in the city. If you can imagine, the city gives them money every year, really out of the goodness of their heart. They're not on the authority, they don't appoint anybody to the authority. It is no small effort on their part to continue to cultivate those relationships. 70% of the airport is owned by the university and leased to the authority, so you have that partner in there that has to be kept happy, and they're also a tenant to the city, more so than the county. So there's a dynamic and a relationship of, you know, the city to what is obviously the 800-pound gorilla in your community, in the university. Yeah, it's a dynamic situation, and we had it this year. That airport was facing its largest project it's ever done. And even its 5% share is beyond its capability within its normal budget. So, early last year, I started working on the board chairman. You know, we need to go up there, and we need to spend some time talking to these folks, and probably ought to start now, because it won't be one visit. And bring some chapstick if you feel whatever. But we did, to where those, because to your point of the investment, and in fact, in that, as you may know, the FAA has sort of moved, or moving, why don't you guys do the design up front locally, and then we'll come in and reimburse the whole, well, that's tough to do. Now you're fronting it, certainly out of an authority's operating budget, that was a struggle, so So it does require those complexities, but once in place, which is why you see most of the large commercial service airports the same way. And even Columbus at some point decided to get out of their way. And then, you know, I'm preaching to the choir, you all know, we had two. We had Rickenbacker Port Authority and we had CRAA, and they decided, the powers that be decided, this is silly. We should not have two competing, we should have one pulling in the same wagon in the same direction. So there are still a few city-run airports, as you all know, and I'd offer to you that full of problems and corruption. Chicago and Atlanta, you know, in Atlanta's case, obviously the state has tried to, said, we'll go take it from them, and well, we all see how that's going.
So what about privatization, or maybe that's not a good word for it, but where there's an FBO that runs the airport, and on the ones that do that, is there still some Port Authority or city or county involvement? Because frankly, any FBO would be out of their mind to take over everything that's involved in an airport, even like Delaware's, I think, because just the mowing alone would probably, they'd pull their hair out.
Right. It's a great question, and many have gone to it. The FBO business is tough these days, except for the busiest airports. You could fit in that. You sell enough fuel, and your traffic growth in the future could be enough that would probably attract somebody to say, hey, we'd love to do it. And they do probably a great, and oftentimes, at least at the outset, a better job of marketing and advertising and brand development than oftentimes, say, the city might be doing now, because they're highly motivated. They're in a for-profit business and mindset in Oregon. I couldn't bring you very many examples where they really have sort of outsourced and all of the airport to the FBO, and it's working real well. And where it breaks down is, you probably desire a higher level public service or a customer service than the FBO does. Or if somebody came in there today, if you can just picture tomorrow someone else is running it, they are all about trying to attract those new customers, and probably the corporate iron that are buying hundreds and hundreds of gallons of fuel each time, and all that. But you want something down at your hangar, and they start going, I'll get to it. That's where that system sort of breaks down. I'll be honest with you, Bolton had it for what? They had an operator, but boy, if you were in the T's, you were gonna wait. They were gonna deal with all those other King Airs or something in the morning, and yeah, we'll come fuel your plane. I myself personally sat there days on 30, 40 minutes waiting for the guy to bring the truck down. That's where that breaks down, and that's certainly where an advantage of, and so you've seen in this competitive environment, or somewhat condensing environment amongst the general aviation community, a lot of airports have begun to run the FBO themselves, much like you do. So it's, how do you do that, provide your customer service, but then still, so they both got pluses and minuses, and we're trying to speak to, here's where we need attention, and if we can pull that off the way we have it set, that would be great. But that's where it breaks down. Third parties, privatization, whether they call it, or P3, and individual pieces and components, makes a lot of sense. And to the Wood County that I was talking about, all that growth that you see up there, that's because the university figured out how to get out of their own way. It's a P3, it's a private operator of that flight school. You wouldn't know that if you just came in. You see the Bowling Green Flight Center. It's wearing the same university colors, logos, and all that. That is a private company. They're building their fourth building. They built an initial building for training and operations and a hangar. 2 years later, we built an even bigger hangar. I think they have 25, 26 aircraft. Granted, it's a university. I get it. It's a flight program, but well over 400 students, and they projected 30% increase by next August, by this August of 2020. But keeping pace with that, in fact, right now, the problem that we're running into is they can move fast. We need to fill in some taxiways and some bypass taxiways out at the end of the runway, right? So you don't get caught in the queue, and you're sitting there ready to go, and some student forgot to do his run-up, and now you're waiting out there, right? The speed of getting those improvements built through the FAA process and grant is mind-numbingly slow to that operator, mind-numbingly slow. And that's with the priority of hey, flight school, you got this big program, so we get the support out of the district office on that, so. But those are some of the challenges, but. Thank you all for your patience. Anything else I can help you with? Thank you, Bill, for your time.
I want to thank Greg again for being here. I think he demonstrates the knowledge he can bring to the whole idea of strategies we need to consider. Shared a bunch of, kind of give you a preview of things we're hoping for. Package all that, Greg, in a report that we can dig our teeth into and have some things to think about. Really great questions. I wanted to mention one thing tonight. We talked about FBO. City manager did want you to know that he has had some discussions with the county just regarding interest and more of an update of where we are and providing that to them. He met with the county last week. Nothing significant or serious, just saying, hey, we're still running this airport. Any interest at all? Not with a plan or a goal in mind, just to have the conversation. So he wanted to make sure you knew that, so no one thinks there's a secret plan going on behind anybody's back here.
Over the years, it's gone through different iterations where the county wanted to have some involvement in it, and then they said, no way, I
Right.
don't want, a few years later.
And I think it's imperative to get, the strategies written up, and then we can sit down and have Greg come back and have some real pointed discussions on these things. There's benefits and there's implications to all these things. And a lot of them, people say, you just need to do this, and they realize the implications, just like Greg mentioned tonight about FBO operations. We can end up with a lot of costs that we didn't think. And the GA folks get left behind. That's not what we want. Port authorities, once you got it, you're stuck with it. So there's a lot of things we need to learn about these so we can help make some decisions, some big level decisions. All involved is, what do we want Delaware Airport to be? What do we want the city airport to be? And I agree with, thanks Greg for his assessment. I think it's a great airport, fantastic facility, pristine maintenance on the place. But in areas, in terms of our regulations, our operating standards, our lease arrangements, those are all areas that we think there's need room for improvement. Our advertising, and Greg's helped highlight some of that through his work, and it's helping us focus on, as a group, as a commission, where we need to be putting our efforts. So getting kind of back on track of the item, it was policies and procedures. I did just want to remind, we did start talking about these policies and procedures back in October of 18. We introduced it, provided them, then emailed those out again. I think Elaine provided all that in the packet again this time. And also in May of 19, we talked about it again and asked again, are there any comments? And Janie, thank you, we did receive a few comments from you, but in large, we didn't receive. What we did get is, at the time, we think our policy procedure is really pretty good, pretty tight. Definitely open for us as staff to make some tweaking, update them to current things, but no one came out and said, hey, we just antiquated, we really don't want these things. In large, we thought, we got the opinion and impression from both the survey results and reaction or lack of additional comment that we got a good set of operating standards and rules and regulations, and they are black and white right now. And Kevin asked me often, how do we want to enforce these? I'm like, these are our adopted rules and regulations. It's black and white. It's in our leases that all of our tenants will follow them, and it's black and white. It's like, you can do this and you can't do that. So enforce what we do have. And if we want to make changes in those, then we have the ability as a commission to do that. And we still have, it's still open, nothing's been rewritten at this point, largely because we didn't get a lot of comment that we need to rewrite them. But it's still an important part of this process that we should update things that have been written 5 years or 10 years or 15 years ago. We really need to look at those. If all we do is correct grammar and put a date 2020 on them, at least they're updated. But that's still there. So we can have some more discussion about those tonight, or we can begin to, as staff, just try to do an update, rewrite to them, present them to you, largely in the same form, updated, highlight any areas that we thought needed to be because of, hey, some things just changed, we call things different, there's different people there, a different set of rules, but get those before you, because we do want to be able to adopt these things. It's up to you if you think there's value in waiting until after we understand some of the strategies to think, well, hey, this strategy sounds great, but it seems to be contradictory to our rules or operation standards, so maybe we do want to change this, if it helps, further the airport's purpose. So we need to, I think that's one of the priorities we need to work on from staff, is get those to a point where you have something to actually at least adopt or have more conversation over. Including comments, Janie, that you provided for us. John provided a good kind of a summary email. I think he copied all of you on with a lot of he went through a lot of the information that we've all had, and after a long conversation, and just provided some good summary feedback too of important areas of concern at the airport. And I think he did a really good job of summarizing a lot of things. And going through the list, there's probably a third of those that are all things that are tasked to our consultant right now that Greg is looking at in terms of leasing arrangements, talking about should we allow more maintenance providers on this field? What does that mean to the airport? The lease issues, do we rewrite those things? Corporate hangars versus no corporate hangars, GA expansion. Well, those are all parts of the plan. So I'm glad that we've identified those as priorities, and we are embracing those as part of the whole strategic plan. There's a couple other areas that we are as a city working on. The top comment was about the rules and regulations, and that is something we are. There's two parts to that. One, what should they be? And we'll adopt those. And two is how should we enforce them? And that's important for us to know, is from the commission's point. How do you want us to enforce the rules? Well, when a rule's written, black and white, it's a rule, and the city staff is going to adhere to that, and it's going to follow it, just like a traffic law or any other rules we have here in the city. So those are some of the comments we get in the survey, and I think someone mentioned that, you made a comment about you don't like this, but you weren't specific. So when someone says, well, the rules aren't fair, I say, well, what does that mean? Does the rule need to be changed? Or should we not enforce that rule? If we shouldn't enforce it, then why should we have it as a rule? So there's two parts to that we need to consider. But when someone says we don't think it's fair or it's not being applied, well, what is that? It really needs to be more specific for us to take action on. So maybe there's a way we can vet that out a little bit more with the airport community out there, because that's important to make sure that everyone understands these are the rules, and we need to enforce what we adopt. There's benefits behind all of them. Also, down the second bullet point from the bottom, talked about customer service and manpower issues. We recognize manpower issues. We're full. We got waiting lists. We got a lot of activity, even on a there was a lot of activity with the warm weather this winter. Mm-hmm. Weekends, there's a lot of activity in the flying season, more than we can really manage. And we presented some proposals for changing manpower, how we use manpower. That didn't make it through the budget process. We're not going to be able to change our staffing arrangement and be able to address that. That wasn't.
You say you cannot? You didn't?
It was not approved through our budget process this year.
I'm one vote. Don't look at me.
Yeah. So, but we're aware of these, and we'll continue to push for these, and for a lot of the reasons that Greg talked about. There's implications to all the expansion type things. What does that mean for manpower? Are we going to need 24/7 if we have 4 or 5 or 6 based jet aircraft out of there? We need to know these things, but they all come back to I don't want to get lost in what we could be, because we have good clientele there now that deserve good service. We want to make sure we're providing that good service. So we do need to understand, we think we have a manpower need right now for some more manpower.
I certainly think you could use some more help, because, well, for one thing, there was a lot of talk about fuel prices, and I do think that we're priced pretty high on the fuel price scale. Mm-hmm. But we're priced at full service. And when Kevin or one of his guys is out mowing or plowing or fixing a hangar door, he can't offer full service.
Right.
I think that should be a point of discussion. I mean, actually, the last couple of months, when I've pulled up there, for one reason or another, somebody has come out, most of the time anyway. So I was pleasantly surprised at that. But I think they could use some more help. And
yeah.
I did see an advertisement, I think, on the city website about a part-time person.
That's for a permanent part-timer, but we did, in our budget process, I explained to Bill, and Bill did push it forward for a full-time staff, but it didn't make the cut. So we acknowledged that and attempted to go that route, but it didn't make it that far, so. Permanent part-time, we're still short, to be truthful with you. The last 4 years, you can find someone to cut grass, that's all they wanna do. You know, we've got a great guy that's working out there right now. He was permanent part-time, but he didn't want anything to do with the office, he didn't want anything to do with people. But I'll tell you what, the guy would go out there and we'd eat for 14 hours straight and never complain once. What do you do? It's just, the permanent part-time thing is very tough, because back to dollars and cents, we try to utilize them when needed. When it snows, we need permanent part-time help. When it's real hot and a good flying day, we need help. But on the days we don't need help, we don't schedule anyone. And that's, I mean, you know, that's tough. When you're talking dollars and cents, you know, you have a gentleman that wants 20, 30 hours a week guaranteed. Or do you have, you know, it's hard to find that person that's just retired looking for nothing except for waiting on their phone for you to call them. Everybody's got a schedule, and when you retire, it's really tough.
But
So-
I read the comments, and then I talk to some of the people around there too, and I see, well, you know, I go to wherever to buy gas because it's 50, 60, 70 cents cheaper or whatever, and they come out and meet you and pump it and so on and so forth. So that, I mean, one of the things that I think we probably have to do to increase some of our revenue is increase our services some, and it's the chicken and the egg thing you brought up. You know, what do you do first?
Right.
And, you know, do you invest in the hangar and then they'll come, or do you wait till they're sitting on the ramp and then build the hangar?
And we did, just in fairness to Greg, we've had conversations about fuel pricing and fuel pricing policy, and that is something that we want to work through, is because we do want to adjust our fuel pricing policy. I think you mentioned in a comment, if you lower it, can we actually increase fuel sales to actually have a higher revenue source? Greg and I have talked about that, and certainly not outside the realm of possibilities of things we could do. The downside is we don't increase fuel sales, we just drop revenue, and then we gotta make it up either through the city contribution to the airport, or we gotta do it through existing tenants' lease rates and things like
It's
that.
one of those things you have to test for a period of time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And when I think I mentioned in here, an economist, I mean, I remember some of my business school stuff where, you know, there are supply and demand charts where they can calculate pretty closely where you're gonna be before you start, you know, losing more money than you make.
Right.
When you lower your prices.
And what's nice now with the new system is we know who's buying fuel. And, you know, if we lower fuel, our existing tenants gonna fly more because it costs them less.
Well, and
So-
you might get people stopping in from
Yeah.
Marysville and from
Yep.
OSU and from.
And that's all information that we should be able to gain off of the system now to say, hey, we've got, you know, 150 more tail numbers this year, probably because our fuel's less. Gallons we never would have sold at the higher cost. So you're right, it's a strategy that I asked Greg to give some consideration to and bring back some things so we can talk about that exactly and make some decisions, because we have that ability in this commission to have those good meaty discussions and come up with some, even if we're piloting, you know, a new process. That's what we want to do. We want to try to improve things at the airport. If that's one of the ways we can do it, we're on board for that. In terms of a lot of the other issues, there's some very specific things that we have already understood. John kind of reiterated them in here. And then on item number 10, the discussion of future topics. There's a lot of things in here that we could do and could consider. Some have been talked and we could revisit them. What I was hoping to get, or at least a point to leave with the airport commission tonight, is we're gonna need some prioritization as to what are the top things we wanna do. We talked about internet tonight, we talked about pavement condition tonight. What are those areas we really wanna bring back and focus on? Because there's probably 20 or 30 topics here, and we'll never get anywhere. But there's some things that are really important. And if we wanna break into discussion, I do want to just have Joe go over the A, B, C, and D, because there were some very specific from our tenants requests that came to us. And because they're our tenants, they do bring these before, and I think it's appropriate for the airport commission to at least hear those things personally. So Joe, if you wanted to just kind of run through, not so much desired future improvements, but there was some discussion on the other ones. And
Yeah, actually, Bernie may want to speak on his own behalf. He's
Yeah.
here this evening. For those of you who don't know, Bernie Rifkin, EAA chapter. We crossed paths probably a month ago, and there was a couple items of interest that Bernie asked me to consider, and I put them on the agenda for this evening. If Bernie wants to talk on them, that's fine. It's up to you.
You'll need to come to the microphone and please give your name and address, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
I wasn't planning on this, but I'll do it. Bernie Rifkin, 364 Whittaker Avenue South in Powell, Ohio. I wear a couple of different hats at the airport. One, I have a small airplane leasing business. I lease my airplanes to the flight school there, and they are doing very well. I'm proud to say that the 3 airplanes last year collectively logged 1,100 plus hours in flights. And that made me very happy. I think my portion of the fuel bill was about 50 grand for last year. So I have been contributing to the economics of the airport. Couple of points here. One is from just a personal request, and one is from the EAA president hat request. The first is the EVT charging stations at the airport as a potential way for you to gather some revenue. I know you've got some charging stations out here in one of the lots, and I thought it might be a good idea to place a couple of those at the airport. I'm seeing more and more electric vehicles at the airport. I own one. Actually, my wife owns one. She lets me drive it every now and then.
Nice
But I am seeing a few more out there, and it might not be a bad idea to have a place for those of us that do have electric vehicles to, when we bring them to the airport, know we can get it charged.
That's another one of those things, it's coming down the pike.
Yeah, yeah.
One way or another,
Yeah.
it's coming.
Right, and you've already got experience in town with putting some stations in, so that's why I thought of that for the airport.
Tell me how those work. I don't have an electric vehicle, so is it like a parking meter? Do you
Yeah,
pay?
there's a couple of different ways to do it. Now, in Powell, they've got, and I'm not suggesting you do it this way, although I like it, 2 different types of stations, and they don't charge for it in Powell. At the municipal building, they've got Tesla station, and they've got a non-Tesla station, and you can still plug a Tesla into it with an adapter. The ones here are more like parking meters, where you plug in and you've got an app on your phone that you log into that. Essentially, my wife uses this when she comes down here. Essentially pay for it right on an app.
Just like the normal parking meters?
It's like a normal parking meter. I think it's 75 cents an hour or something like
Yes.
that.
It's cheap, yeah.
Yeah,
75 cents an hour to charge your car?
yeah.
And it takes how many hours to get it charged?
Well,
on
you're not
average?
gonna leave it there for 8 hours.
Right.
But yeah, there's a
So
limit.
it's just while you're shopping?
While you're shopping or
spending
something
money
else, yeah.
in
While you-
Delaware.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And if your car is fully charged, I think there's a surcharge on it or something, if you're still there. So, anyway, that was one idea. Again, it's coming. So if you can get that part of the infrastructure in place now, before the business plan comes together, that's one less thing you gotta worry about later. The second part, I'm gonna put my EAA president hat on for a moment. We would really like to have our meetings and everything at the airport, since we are part of the airport.
How many people?
We've got a membership of 40. We've got people that come to meetings on average about anywhere from 12 to 20. And we do have meetings once a month in the fall and spring, fall and winter season, I should say. And then we do the pancake breakfast other times. You're all welcome to join us. But in looking at the terminal building, I know it's on a long list to be replaced way down the road, but in order to get some more utility out of it now, a slight remodel of taking out the wall between the lounge and the pilot planning area, which really isn't used very much anymore, because everybody does their flight before they get there. If it broke out that wall and made one large room, we would have a meeting place. I'd like to affectionately call it Lounge 1600 because we're EAA Chapter 1600. But that's just a thought to get more utility out of the building now, help bring the community in. And as I look at our chapter, we are like a representative to general aviation and to the airport. We get some great turnouts over the summer. We've been doing Young Eagles, where we fly kids from 8 to 17 years of age, introduce them to aviation, and they come back year after year, which is good. So anyway, those are just two of my thoughts to pass on to you for consideration.
Have you considered talking to John Shopper too about using the Jetstream, or not the Jetstream, but the Airspace Place area in there once in a while?
Yes,
your
we do
meetings?
use it occasionally, yeah. We gotta keep somebody at the gate to get them in and all that good stuff. But we have used that, we had used meetings, before they sold the last hangar, we were actually using that hangar space for meetings and it worked great. But now that the helicopter business is in there.
Sorry.
That's okay. We do have a meeting place, it is at Willowbrook, the retirement home in there. But it's still, I'd rather have it at the airport. So, and it wouldn't be much to reconfigure that space. I'll even paint it if you want inside. It's not- So, anyway, those are my thoughts for your consideration.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming out tonight.
Oh, no problem.
Bill, you asked about some prioritization or whatever. I mean, I came up with a few things that I thought were priorities. If you'd like, I'll tell you what they are, or if you like, I'll put them in an email or whatever, and see if anybody agrees with me or what they think of them.
Let's hear it.
I initially had 3, but I added one. Number 1 on the list, I think, is that whatever we have to do to resolve the issue with the
Lease.
Jetstream lease,
Mhm.
I think we need to be able to tell Shopner something. Say, either, sorry, suck it up, you know, or this is the way we're gonna change the lease. And I know, you know, that's been a point of contention for several years now, but I really believe that this is something we need to resolve one way or another.
Okay.
Either he's gonna be happy and build another hangar, or, I don't know what's gonna happen otherwise, but
Does he want to build another hangar?
he had one on the drawing board.
Really?
Yeah, this has been, what, 3 years ago, maybe? And then there was some
Probably longer than
realization that, while he thought he had a 75-year ground lease,
Mm-hmm.
Darren apparently thinks that it's a 25-year lease.
Oh.
And that at that point, the building that John put all this money into reverts to the city. Is that a correct interpretation of
Yeah, pretty close.
Reverts to the city when he vacates it, or
No.
reverts immediately?
after 25 years? Where he thought it was 75.
And then he'll start paying rent? Oh my.
No, it's done at 25 years, you know, which is about the time he'll get it paid off.
And that's the nature of, Greg was alluded to earlier, the nature of the ground lease arrangements are you build something knowing that whether it's 50 years, 40 years, 99 years, what you build gets turned over to the airport. What you're basically doing is entering into an opportunity to make money. And how you're gonna make money is you're gonna build something, you're gonna rent it out to people, you're gonna eventually pay off your investment, and you're gonna continue to make money, and then the building becomes the property of the airport. Because it's the airport property you're building it on. That's the nature of how those leases work. With a Jetstream, there's contention over the specific terms of when that turnover period is, and what was that the intention to be in the final version of the lease, and that is what John's alluding to, and what we do, I agree, need to bring that to resolution and work with the owner, because it does represent the airport, it represents how we do business, and it is very important
To me, that's the number 1 thing that should go back to city council that we need to resolve.
So he wants to renegotiate his existing lease?
No, he wants an interpretation of it. He firmly believes, as I think most of the people intended at that time, that it was a 75-year lease.
Okay.
And that at some point in time, he could sell that building and the lease that went with it, and he could, you know, walk away with some money in his pocket, and the next person could continue making money and perhaps sell it again in 25 years. And then at the end of that 75 years, you know, for one thing, during that period of time, the city gets its land lease
Mm-hmm.
payments. And then at the end of the 75 years, the building is turned over to the city, or something else is negotiated at that time, perhaps And I believe from being around at that time, that was the intent when it happened, but that's not the way it's being interpreted now.
Has the city attorney looked at it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
He's the
So-
one that took it from 75 to 25.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
So
done.
it doesn't specifically say in the lease?
It does. But there are different interpretations of what it says.
But if it says 75 years or 25 years, how
It's
do you?
three 25-year things, and
Terms.
if I remember right, the contention is what institutes the second 25 years to continue as it was during the first 25. You know, the implication was, I thought, that so long as the building was well maintained, not abandoned, was in operation as it was intended originally, that the second 25 years kicked in, and then at some point the third 25 years. But,
So now it's being interpreted as 25 years.
25 years, it
25
belongs to the
years
city of
done.
Delaware.
The lease is still, he still has rights in the lease to continue being in the building. And the contention is, there's language in there that says who controls the deed of the building after a certain amount of time. And that's where the interpretation is, that after 25 years, the control of the deed reverts to the city. And that's the contention right there. And I think from the city's point of view, clearly, he's a major tenant out there, and looking at the lease again, it's a little different lease than the airspace place, because it was done under what's called a pioneering agreement, which gave extremely favorable terms on what the ground lease was. So the lease paid very, very little money for the ground. In terms, and maybe that had maybe that's why the lease terms are different, because there's virtually no revenue at all coming off the property.
Off the airspace place.
Off of Jetstream,
Oh.
Jetstream. So, without having been intimately involved in those discussions, I don't wanna speculate why it is that way, but I've written in my list too, that, we definitely wanna take a look at that again and see him. Greg's looked at that, provided some comments also just in general terms on the lease, of what would a good lease be, so absolutely, I think we can keep that top of the list and make that a priority to go through.
Schottmer had that building sold and, had paperwork signed and everything else. And he was gonna build another one.
Uh-huh.
And then after the attorney for the buyer saw that
Saw the
and
lease.
had some discussions with Darren, I think, he said, maybe not, walked away from it. But if we wanna get somebody else in to build another corporate hangar, that's gonna have to be resolved.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think that's number one on the list.
Okay.
Number two, I think that we should look at is, I think we do need some sort of after-hours access to the terminal building. So that tenants there, if they need to use the bathroom, if it's Spencer students, I don't know, I guess maybe they can get into
Tenants should have after-hour access.
Tenants do with their gate
Yeah, swipe card.
Yeah, all tenants can get into the terminal building.
If they've got gate card, they get in.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep. All tenants have access.
Yeah.
to
You've been
the
using the
terminal.
tree.
Yeah.
You've been using the grass this
Yeah.
whole time?
Yeah.
No wonder it won't grow in that one area.
Well, I apologize.
scratch
I
number
did-
2.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
From the parking lot.
From the
Yeah.
parking lot side.
Yeah, swipe your card, you have full access.
Why not the gate, the other side?
It's got a keypad on the front of it. Well, we use that for our transients, so we can give them an access code when they call and come in, so that way we have access.
Use it for who?
The transients
Transients.
that come through, we give them an access number to the ramp side, so that way they have access to the terminal when they need it to, and we know who's in and out of there.
In the old days, the code used to be 1227
In the old days.
to get into that door. Is there a reason why and that seems to be kind of common across the country, is whatever the Unicom frequency is, get you into the door to use the bathroom, or to get, a candy bar, or.
Yeah, we can look at something in the future, but we've had, basically it was the only city building that was not locked and secured. Something we could bring the police department in, ask their opinion, You know, we can look at this in the future, that's not a problem, but all of our tenants right now have an access, and anybody who wants access to the building,
Okay, well, I apologize. I
can
did
get
not-
access to the
I
building?
did not realize that, but I was also thinking about transient pilots, if they stop in to.
yeah,
get
we give them
gas.
one-time access
So-
code so that so they can get
I
in there and do
got a
whatever they
call
need.
about A month ago.
That doesn't happen very often, does it? That
It
there's-
doesn't, and corporate wise, usually.
Usually we're there.
Anyway, but usually we've talked to the flight department and they'll say, well, we really don't need anybody there. Once you fuel us, we leave them in the terminal, we give them the code to the door. And we occasionally will have someone in a single engine or something that weather has them in there and they call the after hours number, we give them the one-time access code and they're in.
Okay. One other thing that I brought up, when there's a jet in there, a Challenger or something usually pretty big, it's parked very near the fueling station. And the other day when I was in there trying to get in there, there were 3 planes. It was sort of a Mexican standoff because they were all facing the fueling station and nobody could back up. I'm wondering, is there a better place to put those
What were
big,
you in
those
and which direction were you coming to the fuel pump?
coming from Jetstream trying to get into the fuel pump?
Okay.
But now
And-
there's
and
another
a
one
fixed
coming the
wing?
other way and one coming in kind of behind where the Challenger was parked.
But you were in a fixed wing, not the helicopter?
Now, I was in a helicopter. And-
We'd like to get people to come out from the hangar side and have a line going that way because, you know, most of the
But you
tenants
can't
come-
do it, at least in a helicopter, because you need to be into the wind usually.
So, I mean, so.
Well, so
because
my point was, is there another place that maybe farther out somewhere that those jets, if they're gonna be there very long, could be parked?
But that being one of the problems that we had, and Joe may not have been there long enough now, one of the largest complaints we always got from parking in front of the maintenance hangar was people running their APUs. All day long, hearing them, and they're working on that building for 10, 12 hours a day. Our past tenant there, his largest complaint was jets being parked out in front of that building. GPU, APUs running, he said it was
Well,
just
I was
annoying as can
thinking
be.
further east than that even.
I hate to use this as an excuse, but it's factual. I would prefer the jets be where they're at, due to asphalt concerns, personally. The water, when we were doing the asphalt process down there, and they were digging up the tie-down areas, our drainage underneath that asphalt, I would say your asphalt's a lot stronger, probably from about the middle of ramp B, going towards the west, just from being out there watching it being rolled and everything of that nature. You know, we even talked to our consultants at the time about snow plows and everything, but just for weight alone, just from being there so many years, that seems to be where our water issues underneath our pavement lay.
That particular spot also, John, we try to put the people that aren't going to be overnighting. That's the spot that we usually have someone that's gonna be in and out in a couple hours, and we try to move them down the spot across from the maintenance hangar or whatever. But sometimes, like the one you might be talking about was a NetJet.
Yeah.
They actually were iced in. They landed, couldn't depart, and I think it was there 4 days. And if you notice, when he departed, we actually towed it over and turned it to the south because they called and asked if we could.
They wanted it to
where
be
we
in the
could get
sun.
most sunlight on it. But we don't like to tow that jet.
Okay, well, that was my third, and then the last one is going back to the customer service, which I think we already discussed. I would love to see some more help added out there that I think would go a long ways towards getting more people to come, getting more people to spend money, whether it's at the maintenance hangar, whether it's buying fuel.
Don't disagree.
I don't know about you, but I hate it when I go in Home Depot or into Kroger and I have to scan my own stuff. It's just
If
kind
you
of a
have 4 or
similar
5
concept.
things, it's not too bad, but when you have 45 things, you're not getting any cheaper discount for scanning your own stuff. Don't disagree with you a bit there, and like I said, we put something in the budget. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, I talked to past employees, let them know that that was my big goal, was to try to get a full-time staff. Kevin and Jason, both are baxed on their vacation, their sick leave. I mean, the guys don't take any time off. That was another, issue that I was concerned with. So, all we can do is try again this year to get some additional staffing, but that was one of my big pet peeves last year. And I even asked for assistance from others, and try to make that happen, so I agree totally.
Well, Bill, those were my 4 priorities. What do you guys think?
I get passed, look at me.
I agree with the leasing issue. I think that should be at the top. And I know you've spoken about this, but I just felt like there were a lot of comments from the survey about people who were concerned about rules and regulations not being either enforced or enforced differently for, as they stated, one person versus another, right? And I don't know exactly what that means, because again, no one really expressed.
Elaborated.
Yeah, they never really said, but I just got the feeling that, I don't know, they didn't specify, but it was just brought up a number of times that there was a difference between the enforcements of rules and regulations for one as opposed to another. So I think that probably needs to be, dealt with, and, and really to let people know if we do revise them, if we don't change them at all, that's fine too, and we just enforce what is already there, but we notify everyone and say, okay, as of this date, this is our set of rules and regulations. Like you say, they're black and white. This is the way they're gonna be enforced. Then, if management has to change some of their practices, then that's what's gonna happen. That's why we have rules and regulations.
Yes, it is.
That's, and I know that some of them can be sort of in a gray area, but, and if we have the rules and regulations, I think we need to make sure that if we state that this is the way something's gonna be done, that we have a way of, or the staff has a way of actually policing it and enforcing it. That might be some of the problem that happens. Maybe Kevin just happens to see somebody doing something that's not in the rules and regulations, but when he's not around, that particular person sees somebody else doing the same thing that they were doing, but Kevin just didn't actually happen to see it. And I don't know that that's what's going on, but
That
I just feel
instance has
like,
happened.
I just feel like we need to, at some point, say, okay, this is the way it's gonna be from now on.
I think that's a great points, and
Correct.
the point, one of the things about having rules and regulations is, and we deal with this in the city in a lot of different areas. If you're gonna enforce things, you need to have a good communication. You need to have an open channel communication and an appeal process. So if someone wants to complain about something, there's a way to do it. It's an open channel. They can get to an appropriate person to listen to what that complaint is. So let's just play that example. Someone say, hey, I got tagged for driving across the ramp, and then I saw, Joe B do that at 7 o'clock this night. And we can say, okay, well, he shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done that, but there was no one there to see it at 7 o'clock at night. So we're not enforcing the rules. We just didn't happen to see it then. That's maybe a staffing issue. If we had people maybe to 9 o'clock at night, we could see more of those. But the point would be, right now, I don't really think we have, communication-wise, a way to, a good two-way street to communicate with all of our tenants, all of our transients, so they can drop off something, or if they're not comfortable, because they have a axe to grind with Kevin, then they can get it to Joe or myself, or to council or the city manager. There's a way that they can be heard, and then we can resolve issues and communicate. Because if you can communicate more openly, and it can start with, here's our new rules and regulations, and here's how you also, if you have a complaint about them, how you can resolve it. Oh, by the way, we have an airport commission that meets. You're welcome to come here and air your complaint to the commission that oversees the airport as well. So I think that's something we can maybe build into the process to provide, instead of just saying we have new rules and thou shalt follow them, we also say, but you're allowed to question, you're allowed to bring forth issues, and we want to hear from you. So I think every process we have in the city has some form of appeal process and boards assigned to hear those, and I don't think the airport should be any different.
I think it would be nice to actually have some teeth to stand behind it too. I
I
mean,
do.
being it fined or, you know, being an airport usage, something of that nature, but I mean, I'll be point frank with you. I've been out there on Mondays, everybody knows Kevin's off, and I've had an individual caught red-handed myself, took video, and said, I didn't expect to see this happen, I knew Kevin was off today, so I figured it'd be a good day to do this. That's happened 2 or 3 occasions. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I know that that's being played both directions too, so I'd agree wholeheartedly with you.
They were doing what when Kevin wasn't there? Taking a video?
I took a video of what they were doing.
Oh, okay.
And they were shell shocked because they knew they could get away with it today because Kevin wasn't working. Monday's his day off.
Are you allowed to mention what they were doing?
I prefer not to because it was definitely exploit who it is.
Fair enough, fair enough. As long as it wasn't my license tag.
I didn't want to say that it was you, Walt.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Do you have everybody's email address from those that are out there? I mean, do you
Yes.
have a way to contact every?
Yes.
Yeah, and we do use that now
Yes.
for putting emails out.
Right, so they should get a rules and regulation, they should also have a list of the emails
Yes.
Yes.
to all 3 of you or whoever. And if they have a problem with Kevin, then they go to the next person.
They get them with every T-hanger tie-down lease also every year.
Yep.
All the rules and regulations are mailed individually every year, and they really, like I said, haven't changed since 2006.
We use it for reminders of leases, we use it for, if there's notice, changes, construction. But what we don't do is, and Greg alluded to this, you know, our overall, our website, our advertising of who we are, you know, friendly information back and forth, to build relationships with our tenants there. It doesn't have to be your lease is due. It can be, you know, it could be we could talk about EA activities. We could do a better job to build that understanding relationship back and forth between tenants. To try to squash down, there's always a few who just don't care what you do or say. They're just gonna be angry airport tenants. But they're tenants, they pay their bills, and they fly. Buy gas, that's fine. But when there's strife and they just talk about it, we don't want that. We don't want people just to be grinding an axe against the airport, because then you know, someone that wants to maybe consider, you know, purchasing a corporate or a hangar, condo hangar, or rent one of ours, and they go to fuel and someone's there grousing about the airport, they may say, well, I'll go to Marysville. So we want to address those things, and
Do you let them know when the meetings are?
we can, yeah.
I mean, that's just a good way to.
Quite a
break the
bit.
ice.
Yeah. But it's a good
That's
point.
the first thing I tell everybody, if they have something they want to bring up or discuss. You know, I can take it clear back to courtesy cars, wherever you, and the individuals that are the ones out there continually griping are the ones I actually tell about the meeting, and those are the ones that don't show up.
And also let them know, you don't
Ju-
have to.
just-
come to
it's
the
no
meeting,
different than
you
your
can watch it on
survey.
YouTube.
Right.
I mean, There's
It's no-
other ways.
Yeah, it's
to
no
know
different than the
what's going on.
survey. We're gonna complain about this, but not explain how to fix it or take it in any more detail. That's, I mean, and that's human nature.
Who was it that you said might be able to help with some of the not advertising, but marketing and such as that? You brought somebody up. in
The
one.
CBB, the Convention Bureau, for the county. It's always constantly looking up to bring people in.
And you think they'd be willing to help?
Why not? You know, this is a huge asset that we have. And when you're
It's huge for
talking
the
to
county
others-
also.
Pardon?
It's a huge asset for the county also.
Exactly.
Probably as
Because
much for them as for us.
But, you know, they could also advertise that we have this.
Well, I think they are, because as Janie points out, most of the time when you're on the radio, they say Delaware County Airport,
Yeah.
so-and-so's.
Well, we have a new director.
Then you see Kevin's head do a
That is right.
360 and he gets upset. That's one of his pet peeves.
So we could,
My husband always used to ask if they were in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, or Indiana.
Indiana.
Yeah.
Aircraft on downwind, are you at the Delaware Municipal
You
Airport?
got really good radio.
so maybe marketing is one we could add in there to improve our marketing image, our website. Greg mentioned, that become separate. Don't make it 4 clicks down in the city, but say it's got its own website.
Well, aren't there companies that do that too,
Mhm.
aren't, that specialize in bringing you to the top of the search?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
part
pay
of
for
our
it.
bill,
Yeah.
I mean, you sat down, and we those, it'd be helpful, right, if you tell me ballpark what that costs and maybe who does those sorts. So Bill has asked us, which we did not do initially, where we said, hey, you ought to do this, and he was, great, give me some details that if we said, yeah, let's do that, he's got something to do. So that's what we'll come back to. There are folks who obviously can help with that prioritization, there's folks who can help, with that. And I want to comment, and it has been discussed before about that community aspect, and maybe to comment, there's not even really a great space. If there was a tenants meeting, you had too many tenants, where would you gather them? And maybe they would come here. I have seen airports who said, great, we're gonna get together and talk about our rules and regulations, we're gonna go down sort of one by one. They're really there for your safety and security, right? I doubt you as a commission have any sort of superfluous, we're gonna have this rule because we're in charge, and we just say we're gonna have this, just to show them that we're in charge. It's really there to protect, and I have found that most tenants, once they sort of really understand it, but it is a re-education, it does require improvement. I don't want somebody running around loose. I mean, and the most obvious example that comes at so many airports is somebody who wants to store fuel in their hand, in a 5-gallon can, or bring in a propane tank because they got a grill. Well, if my $100,000 plane's sitting in the next stall over, I don't really want you to have that stuff. I don't want to go over and tell you because I'm the guy that doesn't like confrontation or whatever. You sort of counter the real regs, and you want Kevin to be the bad guy. That was a thought, and we had chat about, it's just a communication piece, but it does get them to feel like it's not their airport, it's the city's airport, but tenants like to feel like it's their airport, and that's a component of walking them through. I mean, if they feel like they're being treated unjustly, to Bill's point, you point out, just because we didn't catch the other guy speeding, doesn't mean you weren't speeding, but.
Where you get pictures handed to you and they ask you what you're gonna do about it because they didn't wanna confront them.
Right. Right.
We took that wall out, Just saying.
Somewhere to store gas.
I kinda wanna take a second, just kinda touch on what Greg said, because I'm thinking about it. A lot of, as a new business on the airfield,
Can I stop you for 1 second? This is all on YouTube, and if anybody's watching, they can't hear you.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's why we
I got
have you come to the microphone. I know it seems petty,
No, you're okay.
but they're just like, I didn't hear a word he
I
said.
understand.
And we have so many viewers.
How many are online, Karen?
Right now, there's 3. What?
me.
One?
It's
Me.
So you can hear them.
Yeah, but I liked it, so it's okay.
But I like it.
To kind of touch on Greg's position, and me being a new tenant as far as the maintenance hangar at the airfield, and bringing in more business and revenue and stuff for Delaware. My number one hurdle at this point right now is not communicating with any of these individuals right here. They do a phenomenal job. My number one hurdle right now as a new business owner at Delaware Airport is trying to overcome 12 of the past years at the airport. The name that's been associated with the airport. I called a gentleman out in Lancaster who wanted me to do a pre-buy inspection on an aircraft. He wanted to bring it from Lancaster to Delaware for a pre-buy inspection.
Mhm.
And he said, "Are you associated with so-and-so?" And I said, "Oh, no, absolutely not." He said, "Oh, good, because I wasn't gonna talk to you if you were associated with them." And we go back to that whole, it spreads like wildfire. I've talked to people in Akron. "Oh, you're at Delaware Airport? What's your business name again?" "Oh, you're not with that person?" "No, wait, hold up, no, it's new." So, the culture that's been bred at the Delaware Airport for the past 12 years is what I'm trying to catch up from. And obviously marketing and advertising play a huge role in that. But what I find is it's the past 10, 12 years that I'm trying to play catch up for at this point. I've had several customers. I think when I submitted my business plan, I told them, I said, my biggest hurdle is gonna be bringing business back to the airport. Kevin said something, I'm just throwing rough numbers out, something like 80% of the tenants were going somewhere else for maintenance needs. And I'm slowly pulling those people back in. And and you talk about revenue, you know, you're dragging people, the Lancaster issue, I'm dragging people from other airports, trying to bring them in. You'll get fuel sales, stuff like that. I'm pulling customers from OSU coming to Delaware, pulling people from Bolton coming to Delaware from services that I offer. And as word travels, there's a twin Cessna dealer up in Northern Ohio. They have my business cards. So if somebody comes to them and says, well, can you work on my single engine airplane? We're not in that business. We don't do that. But here's Joe at Delaware. Take your stuff to him. He's a good guy and he runs an upstanding business. I've had half a dozen people come from that twin engine Cessna dealer. You know, I'm trying to pull it all back in, and I think that's your hurdle. You guys, it's word of mouth and advertising, but I believe one person walks out of my shop and says, that Joe guy's a good guy. He walks out and tells 10 other people in the first 10 minutes he leaves my shop. You know what I mean? And same thing happens. If he has a bad experience at my shop and he walks out, he told 20 people in the first 10 minutes. And that's where I'm trying to pull stuff back. I am on board with all these guys, you guys as well, as promoting the airport. I grew up around aviation. I was an aircraft owner for 4 years myself, hangared at Delaware Airport. I think that's kind of where I'm going for the city, for my business as well, to try and pull that stuff in. But that's just kind of like food for thought. I just wanted to throw that out there and see if, you know, maybe light a couple fires or something. And as well as to kind of piggyback off of listening to what Greg was saying, where is the incentive for me as a business owner right now leasing from the city? Where is incentive for me fall to build a hangar if it was in my future plans, if you're only going to give me a 25-year lease? I'm not building a multi-million-dollar hangar for 25 years just to, after 25 years, to turn it over. Financially, business-wise, makes no sense to me. You know what I mean? Especially somebody who might be family-oriented that wants to pass that down generation to generation. I understand the city needs to make money, but you got to sweeten the deal for somebody like myself who wants to come in and say, oh yeah, I'm going to drop $3 million on this hangar, and you know, you can have it in 25 years. I mean, put yourself in my shoes though. Is that something you'd be willing to do? You're going to walk up to the front door of you know, any of these guys and be like, you know, here's I'm gonna drop all this time and effort and money into this just to let it go in 25 years. It's a pretty big chunk to bite off and know it's gonna be gone in 25 years regardless of what you do. So that's just, I mean, me being here for the first time, it's definitely enlightened stuff. You know, it's brought thought as far as, you know, those people, you want people to come to Delaware, but if there's a 25-year lease, why would they stay if they know they're going to give it up? Why wouldn't they go to another airport that's going to cut them that 50, 75-year lease? You know, and they can pass that, they can make their money, they can pass it from the generation. I feel like there's got to be a middle ground for both parties, whether it's, you know, the city raising the rate on the land lease so they can make that money they need, you know, or I don't know. I don't know a lot of people who are going to drop $3-4 million, whatever, in a hangar and be like, you know, after 25 years, I'm gonna wash my hands and just give it away. I think that's a pretty, in my opinion, not to insult anybody. I feel like if it was me and I had that kind of money going at a project, I would probably walk away.
From the FAA standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, it's a 40-year preferred on their land lease programs, up to 40-year, isn't it?
Correct.
Preferred.
Correct. And they draw a line, and what we'll see, airports will set based on investment, and what Joe's pointed out is the struggle for many of their
Correct.
business owners. We in the Midwest have this little bit of, it's mine, I'm going to carry it on, when in fact, if you're able to really truly look at it, if you're able to only look at it truly as a business transaction, it's just money, right? Anybody
take $3 million, put it in something, figure out what the cost is, just, you go down to the bank, borrow the money. So that's part of the problem that I've spoken to Bill about. Bill understands it very well, the process, and how to communicate it. And so whether that means that the city or the airport needs to make the initial investment once, because again, it takes that emotional side out of it. I don't mean to say that and be disparaging, but if I come in and I just lease a building, it's like anything else we lease. Right now, it's just a financial transaction in your business. Am I earning revenue to cover it? What's my net profit at the end? And I'm done. And then you walk away from it, whether it's 7 years, 10 years, 25, 30 years. And so that's that culture, and getting it in those documents, having it communicated, and being part of the message. And to the extent that we can create a place where people will come and build a legacy, all the better. But it differs. So thank you for those comments, Joe. Those are terrific. Thanks, Mayor.
That's all I have.
Sorry to put you on the spot again.
So I've just taken my notes and what I have from the discussions. The corporate lease terms keeps rising to the top. So is it priority things for us to look at, do some work on, bring back some information at our next meeting, corporate leases, rules and regs to move forward with that. Marketing and promotion of our airport. Of course, the strategic business plan, we hope to have a final draft version available for our next meeting. Actually, if Greg's true to his word here and having it to us sooner, I think our goal would be to provide it out to the committee. So you have plenty of time to digest it, and then come back and have some discussion over it, question and answer with Greg again, if we want to make some final modifications to it, so we have something to adopt. Those are areas I have. I do want to mention, because Bernie's here, there is a memo floating around. I've provided background information, I think it's with the city manager right now, for council regarding our current EV charging station and our solar panel, about how that's been used in the past year, what kind of revenues we're getting off of that. So that's something that I think is going to go to council, but could probably come to this committee just as well, to understand a little bit more about the EV stations and what the kind of costs are involved in that. And then lastly, customer service, mentioned that I think that's key, and part of that's communication and staffing arrangement, things like that, just to keep that in the forefront, because I think it's important to our current tenants, and probably very important to the ability to expand the airport. So that's what I had on my list of all the things we can talk about, some high priority issues right there. I think because Bernie did take the chance to, we should at least come back with some discussion regarding benefits and difficulties in the proposal on the terminal building, if we want to turn that into more of a, I would like to think that we could have these meetings at the airport someday too. Not do it here, but we have airport meetings at the airport. And
We have to get internet so we can.
I have to get internet.
Looks like we're gonna knock out a wall, huh?
Yeah.
No,
So.
Well, we talked about that. We talked one time about having at least sometimes these meetings out at the airport, and kind of decided that it might not be a good idea because the public, is going to get confused about finding it for one, and accommodations to seat them. And I think we did take a van ride one time out there some years ago.
Can't be on YouTube now.
Yeah.
So is there anything else in terms of things we want to make priorities up front to bring back, or is that enough of a full plate right there to focus on?
I think that's enough.
Okay.
Is there much grant money left on those charging stations?
No,
There's no grant
the
money
grants
left
are for single stations.
Okay.
And the grant is now different than the one that was.
I heard it changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aren't there companies that will put them in? That's their business, is putting these charging stations in, or is that not the direction you want to go?
My understanding is, what's the one you mentioned, Bernie, for the?
Well, Tesla.
Tesla will put them in, if you
will?
buy a Tesla. So.
If you buy a Tesla?
Yeah, Tesla's specific.
Yeah.
Ours are by ChargePoint, they're universal for anyone who has an electric vehicle.
I was thinking ChargePoint was one that would do it so that they could get the revenue.
They do.
Okay.
That's my memo, the memo I wrote summarizes our experience with the ChargePoint so far. It's been in for a little more than a year. Or I should say half a year, we put it in May, I think. So.
My wife uses it every time she flies.
Great, I see your usage then on my computer.
Are we planning any outreach for the summer like we did with the Ford last year? Because at least, my neighborhood is right by, was in the flight line, and they, like lots of people you're talking about it, and is anything
You're
planned?
gonna ask me to come up here anyways.
Yeah, you might as well come up to the microphone.
We did that 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. I'm still recovering from it.
Okay.
Not to say we won't ever do it again, but the planning cycle is like 2 years, and I don't know if there's gonna be one available this year, and I don't know that we could actually
Okay.
coordinate it for this year. We do, from an outreach perspective, over the summer from the third Saturday in May through September, July is always questionable, but we do our breakfasts. And I think I've seen you out
Yep.
for one of the breakfasts. And at those breakfasts, we have Young Eagles events, as I mentioned. And that brings a lot of people out to the airport. And it does introduce a lot of parents and their children to general aviation. And one thing I don't want this group or any of the groups to lose sight of is that there's a shortage of pilots out there, and they're coming up through general aviation. One of the I said my planes have had 1,100 hours. There have been at least 20 or 30 pilots that are going in it for careers that have gotten their education through our airport. So when we say go corporate, yeah, possibly from a revenue perspective, but don't forget the part that the general aviation perspective plays in the entire spectrum of aviation. So I just wanted to make that point. And one other point I did want to make while I'm here, you talked about fuel prices. I know a lot of our Young Eagles pilots will fuel their plane at Marysville and not at Delaware, because in Marysville, there's a deal with Phillips that they get a discount for Young Eagles pilots.
Oh.
So there are things in those mixes that will, kind of filter where people will get their fuel for certain events. Not everybody does, but I know there are several that will do that. Because the fuel for those trips are all the expense is borne by the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And the time for their plane too. So, I mean, this community gives back a lot. You guys all know that, for the future. So, and I also heard that there's a waiting list of people that need hangars.
T-hangers?
T-hangers?
Correct.
If you built them, they'll come. You've got the demand right there. So, anyway, I'm off on a tangent. I apologize for that. But just some things to think about. So as far as community events we do in the summer, yeah, we're always thinking about things to plan. It just takes a lot of energy.
Sure.
So, but yeah, we'll do something. Not this year, next year for sure.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
This summer I did a 5K at the airport in Columbus. And I went because I wanted to run on the runway. But it was really, really cool. And we raised a lot of money for Autoflight.
I was there.
You were there, that's right, you ran it too. I didn't even see you, there were so many people there. But it was just something to think about.
Yep.
It was awesome.
For Honor Flight, you said?
Honor Flight.
And our chapter doing this year at Honor Flight as well.
Thank you.
All right, where are we?
I think adjournment, no, just kidding.
I think any more, I can't imagine there's any more staff comments, member comments. Next meeting, April 16th.
Well.
Did you have one, Walt?
Comment.
Well,
Sorry.
no, it's okay, it's all, no worries. I'm just excited to hear that we're gonna explore the possibility of a separate website for the airport. And, I think it'd be great to look at fuel prices. I know it's been a rub over the years, but, tenants want it cheaper, city needs it to be at a higher rate. But if we could just stop the exodus of people that are flying depends, either going to Madison County to fuel or Knox County to fuel. For a short flight, no one's gonna do that. But if you're flying a Baron, you need 106 gallons, you go into Miami, Knox County and Madison County, pretty close. And there's at least 6 or 8 people I know that on any type of major trip, they'll fuel somewhere else.
Or if they're just up flying around for fun anyway, they'll go somewhere and get fuel.
Right. If
So
they're,
I've heard
if they
this-
got half tanks, they'll fly around for an hour, and then they'll land at Madison, top off, and come home.
So I've heard this at a couple different, one of these, how much higher, I mean, are we than surrounding
You said 7 cents?
Sometimes $1.
per gallon?
But we're generally less
on
than
the average,
OSU,
we're not.
right?
Not on the average.
We're less than OSU, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
usually
but
right there-
OSU, honestly, you call them, the truck comes,
And
you get
usually
your
right there
fuel,
with
and you're
Marysville
gone.
too.
Pardon?
And usually right there with Marysville too, and a lot of places don't offer the 10 cent a gallon on the weekends.
Right.
But we're working on a matrix, and that was one of the things we discussed with Greg through the business plan, is we would like to have something set. And, you know, we discussed it, and the future is manpower, we've already discussed. Vehicles, trucks, equipment, everything, all that comes at a cost. And if you pump twice as much fuel, but you're making the same amount of money too, I mean, these are conversations we had in the beginning. But it does promote your airport. But at the same token, there's a cost at doing it. And the more money you take away from this, the more maybe your T hangar rent has to go up. I mean, there's gotta be a balance in check somewhere. Or the more
That's
we
an
have, or more we have to get from
It's an
the general
experiment
fund.
that we have, you know, if we wanna look at it, that's an experiment we have to.
Correct.
We have to do.
Agreed.
Because
Correct.
maybe
But
then there's some
that's what I
way
said.
we can,
Yep.
if we buy more fuel, we get
It-
it at a lower cost too.
Correct.
And-
Well, we
I
can't
know
buy more,
that-
we
I
can't buy
know-
more fuel at a lower cost.
Because you can't store it.
Yeah, we have nowhere to put it.
That
And
was.
Today.
Yeah, so it's, like, investing in the infrastructure
Mhm.
will enable you to have a better base to earn income on.
And you could play the fuel game. If you could hold 24,000 gallons, you could buy when you know fuel is generally cheaper than it is. But you're playing, you know, for lack of better terms, you're playing a stock market. But, you know, there are opportunities there
Mhm.
at a cost.
And my last comment is, I'm glad to hear that we're talking better with the county. Maybe we should get them to buy in. Because I don't have statistics, but I'm guessing that if Kevin took a good look at all the aircraft that are based, I bet you less than half live in Delaware. Don't you think the majority live in suburbs and other parts of the county?
Yeah.
And that would be a
Absolutely.
real big point I would like to bring up, or someone should bring up to the county and say, look, you know, more than half of the people here are in the county. So,
Good point.
that's all I had, thank you.
I would guess too that probably not more than half of the people in the county even know that there is an airport here.
Nor in the city.
Yeah, I'm just amazed when people say that. Delaware has an airport?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
Where's it at?
Yeah.
Where is it? You got an airport?
Mm-hmm.
I also need to mention something I think is kind of funny. On Facebook, I'm part of the group that's I can't remember the exact term, but it's the Emergency and Fire something or other group. And last Saturday, maybe, was last Saturday a nice flying day? I don't remember, but there was one day in the past week or so where the check jet was taking off. And this one particular person happened to see it take off. Well, she posted on this particular Facebook page for this group that there was this military aircraft taking off at the Delaware airport, and she wanted to know what was going on. Are we under attack? What is going on?
At least she knew there was an airport.
Well, I had to see
Oh
it
my.
take off. I mean, she was by the airport, obviously, to see it take off. Well, I mean, just precipitated all kinds of comments, and I just had to bite my tongue to not say anything, because I knew if I said something, I would just be attacked.
Was there a picture of it on the ramp being fueled too?
Not on this particular
Okay.
feed, no, but that might have happened
That one
later.
trickled.
But was it a military aircraft?
No.
It was that Czechoslovakian jet.
L-39 was there, and it
Yeah.
appears the camouflage look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
It was there for 7,
So
8 days.
But it covered the whole gamut of, well, you know you're not supposed to be even saying something like that on the internet. If it's a military operation, you're not supposed to broadcast it because it's supposed to be kept under wraps or whatever. And I mean, it just went on and on, and it was it just got to the point where it was just crazy. I know that's totally off the subject, but I just thought it was kind of funny.
All right, do we vote for joint adjournment?
Just
Or
a motion and a second would be great.
All right,
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
I'll third it.
we're adjourned.
I'm just gonna make the name of it.
April 16th?
Day after tax day?
Now, April 16th is the week after Easter, so the Sunday before is Easter. So if, you know, we can look and make sure you guys don't have any travel plans for the holiday week.
I'm leaving the day after Easter.
So that would be you,
That'd be you.
that would be you. So we had this problem last year, and that's why we met in May. So that might be something, we can talk about that through email.
Okay.
Let me know.
Does that work?
Sure.
I didn't communicate.
Hopefully I won't be
Sure.
walking like I'm 100 then.